Welcome to day 3 of our daily live streams here on the new EdTech Classroom YouTube channel. We are at ISTE Live here in New Orleans, and this project and these live streams are a partnership with ISTE to bring you conversations about empowering educators and elevating equity. We have got a fantastic schedule. Just looking at the schedule today, we've got Ken Shelton joining us, we've got Michael Cohen, we've got Monica Burns, we've got Lisa Highfill, we've got Dee Lanier joining us again as well. And these live streams are a collaboration with the Infused Classroom with Holly Clark, who is joining Sam Kary today in our first session. And they are sitting down with an educator of over 20 years. He has worked extensively at the policy level with a number of state departments of education. He is an Apple Distinguished Educator, a Microsoft Innovative Educator Expert, a Google Certified Innovator, and just this week he was awarded ISTE's prestigious Making It Happen Award, which honors visionary educators and leaders who cultivate connected and empowered learners. We're honored to have Ken Shelton joining us on the show today.
I am so honored to be the person who gets to talk with you because, Ken, we are very close friends and I know your message. And I want to talk a little bit about something I heard you talk about yesterday, which was what's the word you say? It's you're not disrupting, you're breaking down everything. So can you talk more about that?
Yeah, so I consider myself a degree of a word nerd.
Yeah, you are.
I embrace that. So I wear it as a badge of honor. And I think for us in education, we tend to use a lot of descriptors and a lot of acronyms that they can do two things. One, first of all, the words are used and there's no definitions provided within context. And then also, when you start to really scrutinize the language, you realize that sometimes the words that you use, because that's what's been normalized, are not aligned with the end result that you want. And so I shared yesterday in the talk that I happened to be able to do after you when you talked about TikTok, which by the way I thought was fantastic, is the whole idea around, you hear a lot of educators say that we need to disrupt. And so part of what I shared, so for the audience, part of what I shared is the fact that disruption is temporary. If you think about a classroom educator and you have a student that is identified as disruptive, what's happened? You had something that was normalized, they changed that, and then you go through the effort and allocation of resources, whether it be human capital or anything else, to prevent that disruption from continuing and then reorient things back to what preceded that. My whole thing is that there are things that are antiquated and that are normalized within education that a simple disruption does nothing more than the equivalent of a remix. They need to be completely dismantled. And I couple that with the whole idea around, you hear a lot of folks use the word reimagine. You can't reimagine something that you haven't completely torn down. If you think about it in terms of like a building, how can I reimagine a different structure while keeping the existing structure? It has to be completely torn down. And so that's why I always share with educators to just be mindful of the fact that some things do not need to be disrupted, they need to be dismantled.
And a lot of the work that you're doing is around that, and you do that with school districts. And what are you seeing happening at school districts in terms of that? Are people able to do that? Are there structures and things in the way that are stopping that? What's happening when you're out there?
A lot.
Yeah.
First of all, that's why, as was shared in my bio, that's why I tend to prefer to do more policy level work. Or, if when possible, I tend to request, require, urge, encourage for the work that I do around organizational leadership to include policy level work. So a lot of the things I've done with districts that are around diversity, equity, inclusion, and organizational change includes the school board. Because ultimately, not to discredit, diminish, or devalue what teachers do, policy and what the board says and what the executive cabinet says, that's your guardrails. And unfortunately, I had to operate within those guardrails during my time in the classroom. I'm old enough to remember back when all of us were promoting and pitching people to use technology in education. But the thing around that is, unless you get it co-signed by the site administrator or some district level person to even acquire that technology, no matter how much you think it's going to work, you're not going to get it. And so for me, it really is looking at what are the existing policies that either reinforce or create inequities that are perpetuated and then operationalized by the actions of the people. And that's why I always say it's a multi-tiered approach. You got to look at people, policy, and practice. So what I am seeing, first of all, one of the things that you heard me mention in the talk, so for the audience, one of the things I brought up in my talk yesterday is that grading, the antiquated systems of grading that we have need to be dismantled. The grading does nothing more than to sort and stratify students. It is not a meaningful feedback mechanism, and it does not represent learning, period. Anytime you attach a letter, you oversimplify the totality of the learning experience when you summate it down simply to a letter. So what I'm seeing, one, anytime you're troubling a narrative and you're looking at dismantling antiquated systems, there's going to be resistance. People like what's safe, comfortable, and familiar, even if it doesn't benefit them, because they know what to expect. The added layer to that is when you start to interrogate things like grading and ask yourself the right questions, like I brought it up in the talk yesterday, something as simple as, why do we use a 100-point scale? If you think about how it's traditionally used, again, antiquated, 59 of those 100 points represent failure. Why is a majority of, pretty much a significant majority of that scale, failure? Mm-hmm. And then even if you really break it down and you say, okay, well, the other score ranges, those can be successful. I disagree with that vehemently. Your margin of success is really only 90 to 100, which is 11 percentage points. So now let's look at that 100-point scale. You're really saying only 11% of the learners that operate within this scale will be successful. Most educators would look at that from that perspective and say, well, that's not equitable, and that's not aligned with empowering learners. It's not aligned with doing any of those things. So the whole idea is to really start to interrogate things that we've done because we, quote unquote, have always done them, and ask yourself, how is this creating inequities by design? How is it stratifying students? How is it denying access and opportunity for students to be able to realize their full potential? You are seeing a lot of districts starting to really look at their grading practices. One of the other areas that I really push for are accessibility to what I define as higher academically rigorous programs, and that usually is visualized in honors and AP level classes. Full disclosure, I'm not an advocate for the AP curriculum or AP exams and AP courses because ultimately the courses are test prep. I am for the rigor of the environment that supports higher order thinking, critical and analytical thought, and ways in which students can be pushed appropriately and academically. So what I'm seeing in that regard are things like, what are the enrollment practices? How are you supporting and encouraging students, especially students of a historically excluded and marginalized background, to take those classes? You and I know each other very well. I share in one of my keynotes that I was at a high school that was 25% black students, yet I was the only black male student in all of my AP and honors level classes for all 4 years I was in high school. The minimum what that high school should have done is said that the percentage representation in those classes should be commensurate to the percentage representation of the campus. So there's a lot of things that are going on, whether it's in our dialogue or actualized in shifts in policy and along those lines that's happening. But of course, nothing of anything meaningful shift is not going to occur without resistance. And most of the resistance is usually out of a myopic perspective, significant implicit biases, more specifically bandwagon effect and confirmation bias. And so that's why, for me, it's the importance of the work and to have the right impact. And I know that, yes, you do have to work with classroom practitioners, but you also have to be more, you have to also analyze the policies that may be reinforcing or encouraging the behaviors that you're seeing in the practitioner.
And to be able to do that, I would say, just from our conversations that we have a lot, you have to have the right people at the table. This
Right.
has to be a diverse population at the table, or you're not going to understand the needs of the diversity.
Correct. And and to add another layer to that, just for full disclosure, I have no problem with people that are opposed to some degree, that's sitting at the table for that dialogue. The key, which I've been able to develop mechanisms that are pretty good now, the key is to discern the difference between the good faith actors and the bad faith actors. The bad faith actors are going to be resistant despite and no matter what new information comes up that will force them to examine their existing beliefs Those are the bad faith actors. They're not interested in hearing it, they just don't want it because either one, they significantly benefit from it, or two, it'll force them to examine themselves. The good faith actors are the ones that said, I don't agree, but I'm willing to listen.
And we've seen that at board meetings that you've been at. When you are, so maybe you can speak a little bit about some of the resistance that you have faced at boards across the nation.
Across the country, yeah.
And also after that, the part where you involve students in this change.
So usually when I do my organizational change work, the perfect scenario that I always encourage executive cabinets is I work with a cohort of classroom practitioners, coaches, and site administrators. Then I also work with what I call a community partnership group, which the community partnership group involves students, members of that cohort, and members of the community. Because I'm a big believer in building community, and you have to involve community members in the discussion and, quite frankly, in the work. And part of the reason why I'm pretty insistent upon that is because the work that I do with districts is going to be temporary/finite. I don't live in those communities, and I'm not going to stay there. But my main approach around it is the work has to be sustainable. How do I want to be able to ensure that the work will continue to evolve and grow long after I'm gone? You mentioned the student group. I love working with what I call student advocacy and empowerment groups. It's students that are giving us a clear window into their experiences in the classroom, the hallways of the campus, the activities they're involved in. The student voice those are the three pillars. And quite frankly, I don't like to speak in absolutes and say the whole, like, this is non-negotiable. But when I engage in the dialogue around the importance of involving the student voice in this, and when I say student voice, not me speaking for the students being supported to assert their own agency with this, then supporting the classroom practitioners, then both of those are also a part of that community partnership. That's where you get the degrees of sustainability among many things. And yes, so in that work, there's always going to be the resistance. I can go into details about it, but there are things from comments that have been made about me in public comment and board meetings, appearing in a local paper, appearing in local television programming, and all those things. But what I will say is that more often than not, there are members of the community whose voices are aligned with the purpose of the work and the intentionality and the reasons behind the work. They now become galvanized, and they also speak up. And that's why I said, someone who's opposed, I don't believe in closing the door. I believe in providing, again, discerning good faith versus bad faith actors and including them in the process. And I will say that pretty much every single time we've involved folks that are opposed to it, as the process evolves, and I always say you need to give yourself a chance to understand why this work is important before you recognize the larger scope or the larger goal. You need to recognize that all of us, it's a poem that I always share in my workshop. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow as one of the line. So how are you going to take ownership over your learning? How are you going to recognize and give yourself the grace and the space that you have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow? You want to operate from I'm getting new information that will put me in a position to simply learn and grow, not I'm getting new information that I'm going to receive as I'm a bad person and I'm guilting and shaming. I don't, that is not conducive for growth. And so despite the resistance that I get, that in some cases is pretty strong, you get several things that happen in that. One is, with many of the districts I work with, many of those students will now go speak up in the board meeting. And it's a beautiful thing to watch because it's something where it makes me feel good because what I have done is I have simply been the catalyst to say, here's our pathway. And I'll use a Star Wars reference. I'm Yoda and they're Luke Skywalker. I'm not going to tell you how it works. I'm going to support you in identifying what gifts you have and how to utilize those gifts to amplify your agency and your voice and use it in the appropriate venues. They don't need me. My goal is to support you and through facilitation to do that. But that also happens with many of those community members, and I've seen many. I've gotten lots of emails, messages on LinkedIn, and even personal comments where there are folks that were resistant when we started, and then they start to examine their own lived experience, their own perspective, their own viewpoints, and how is that Why were you opposed? What did you expect? How is this different? How will you utilize that growth going forward to engage in dialogue within your respective circles in the community. Support, the executive cabinet or the school board in continuing this work. Support the school board in adopting definitive policies that support this work. Because ultimately, and again, that's why I would say it's truly a community endeavor. The school is the hub of the community, but you have to involve the community in that. And that's why I'm not opposed to folks to being a part of that process that don't understand or are against the work at the start, as long as they're willing to operate in good faith, which is you're going to take ownership of your learning, you're going to contribute to the dialogue, you're going to be transparent about what you're opposed to, why you're opposed to it, and how does your growth within that perspective, how is it aligned with the end result goal, which the main goal is to ensure that the learner experience is one of which they are seen, heard, and loved in the schools. That's it.
I'm curious your perspective about this moment nationally post remote teaching that was induced by the pandemic. If you see that potentially a silver lining of the pandemic and this mass disruption is that it is an opportune moment historically to be able to reconstruct education. I'm curious if you're seeing people sort of embracing that on a national level, or if you're seeing actually kind of a backlash to it, a sort of retreat back to the way that we did things, and that in some ways we've perhaps taken a step back in certain places, and sort of how you're addressing that. So
yeah, that's a good point. I see the attempts to reconstruct in pockets. I also see, I always say it's for historical context. It's the pendulum of our social mores and our social narratives. Every time there's progress is made, there's a vehement effort to push it back the other way, and it's a constant swinging back and forth of that pendulum. The thing that the remote learning did, that COVID did, is it forced people to see what they were. Quite frankly, they had the privilege of not having to see. And so what I am seeing is a much more collective effort around things like, how do we ensure at the policy level ubiquitous broadband access? I shouldn't be able to go to certain zip codes throughout the country and not have broadband access, not have cell phone access. That to me in and of itself is it's not even a digital divide, it's what I call a digital impoverishment. Because what you're doing is it's not just you don't have access. If we're at a tech conference, we know tech. Think about, I take away your accessibility. I'm not just taking away your email. I'm taking away your banking. I'm taking away your opportunity for learning. Holly has a phenomenal talk on TikTok. I'm taking away your opportunity for microlearning. I'm taking away your opportunity to be creator and posting. I'm taking away your opportunity for entrepreneurship. I think that the more you see the access become ubiquitous, you will see that zip code is no longer a barrier towards you realizing things like, oh, I want to start an online business. I want to be able to, I have friends that are administrators in rural districts, and I always ask, look, if you had broadband access, how might that empower some of the students in your school district to say, I don't have to leave my community in order to do fill in the blank? Like that, and think about what it can do for localized economies. I've had the privilege of speaking in a lot of areas around the country where I see the decline in the local economy because either people are leaving those communities or they're not moving into those communities. And so that's why for me, I can give a definitive micro and macro economic argument as to why you need to have broadband access be ubiquitous. Then you add that into the schooling environment where, it's how does access provide opportunity, and opportunity should be infinite and limitless, and your socioeconomic status and your geography should not be barriers to that. So you are seeing that because that's something that everyone can get behind. That's where I always talk about diversity, is that it's a lot less about altruism and a lot more about interest convergence. And it's also not limited to the optics, not limited to one component of our identity. That's one where social class it affects a lot of people across many different race, language, ability, all those factors. So you are seeing a push around that, but you're also seeing a resistance to, no, I want things to be what they were, due in no small part to, I and or my children significantly benefit from it. And then for me, I always shift that dialogue to, do you believe that equity is a zero-sum game? Do you believe that I have to take something from you and give it to somebody else in order for true equity to be in place? And you see, and then of course, again, I want to engage, I'm going to ask the questions, I want to engage in the dialogue. And again, that's one of my tactics, or I won't tactics, but that's one of my ways that I protect my energy to discern a bad faith actor from a good faith. A good faith actor will say, oh, I haven't thought about that. Now we can engage in a dialogue. A bad faith actor will say, I don't know and I don't care. This is what I believe and I'm sticking to it and I'm not gonna do it. That's a bad faith actor. So there's going to be resistance no matter what. There's a Frederick Douglass quote, there is no progress without struggle. And I equate struggle to our collective efforts around, we see things that many others don't, and how are we going to build a coalition to see those things operationalized, actualized, and be a part of our evolution and honestly in the human condition, period.
A couple of years ago, actually at the last conference that we had here in New Orleans, Creative Constructor Lab, I heard you give a keynote talk about Tequity, and one of the things that you highlight is that it's not just about devices. Oftentimes we are thinking about broadband, we're thinking about access to one-to-one computers, we're also thinking about, or we need to think about what we're having students do with those devices,
right,
that they are creating with those devices, that they are actually engaged with, like you said, rigorous activities. It seems like we have perhaps gotten a little bit closer to getting one-to-one, to getting broadband, and that a next major hurdle is how do we get educators to not just put a computer in front of a student and have them go on like a game or a personalized learning program where they're essentially just learning via the computer. So
right,
what are you doing when you're working with districts? How are you suggesting that they can also put in place some practices, some programs to get students to engage in this project-based learning, the kind of real rigorous creation with technology that I know you advocate for?
Yeah, I thank you for asking that question. It's a brilliant question. So my default in a scenario like that, and this points back to what Holly asked earlier around the policy. My first default question is, what has been your professional growth plan over the last 1, 3, and 5 years? It's very easy, and this is something I want to be crystal clear to the audience on. It's very easy, and I quite frankly, I call it the cheap way out. It's very easy to default to placing the blame on the classroom educators. You cannot blame a teacher if they've never been afforded the access and the opportunity to engage in a professional growth around using the devices in the first place. So that's the first part. So I always ask the question, what was your professional growth plan a year ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago? What's in the strategic plan that is aligned with supporting the growth of educators in not just the acquisition and implementation of the devices, but how those devices are being used? How is that growth plan sustainable? I always share, you want to focus on sustainability before you get to scalability. Then, when I work with teachers, it's what are the programs, resources, and supports that you need in order to support students around higher order thinking? I will define higher order thinking. Using their existing gifts and skills and growing those where technology is a necessary and critical conduit towards realizing their full potential. Developing critical and analytical skills within relevance of the content, doing it in ways that it is appropriately individualized but appropriately scaffolded as well. So for example, instead of having students, let's say, write a poem, we're going to look at a bunch of different poems, we're going to do a deeper analysis of what was the disposition of the author, what is the message that's obvious, what are some of the hidden messages, how do we use language in a strategic capacity to convey a story when you have a limited amount of words or space to be able to do that? Let's look at the structure of all the different structures of poetry. Let's define poetry in a cultural context. Have you seen poetry that's relevant to your cultural identity? Bring that into the dialogue. How does culture impact and how do our experiences impact the ways in which we write poetry? One of my favorite ways I used to do that was using music and using the lyrics. I would literally show lyrics of a song and I would say, you all should know that songs is poetry, technically. And I go, but I want you to see it and I want you to analyze the context of the writing of it and everything else. And Once you do that, now you've done that analysis. Now I can go into the creative aspect and say, okay, now that I've built this background knowledge, how do I use that and apply my lens to it? That would be an example of it. And of course, my favorite thing, how could you involve technology in that? You not just write it, but then you record a video and you recite it.
Connects with your work and pressing record and adding the metacognitive element after you've done creation to get students to actually reflect back on their work. So it's a perfect through line back to our conversation on Monday.
And now you know why we love working together so much, for the very reason you just said.
Absolutely.
See, we have different viewpoints to the same learning and experiential outcome. And that's the beauty of being able to do that. If Holly does it alone or if I do it alone, we're going to have an impact. But I always say you want to have an arrangement or a situation where ideally the whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
Well, Ken, I know you're sticking around for the next panel. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks so much for coming to this live stream here at ISTE 2022 in New Orleans, and we'll see you in a moment.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
I really enjoyed that conversation. Right now, I actually have Omar Lopez here with us to kind of chat a little bit about what they had talked about. So, Omar, for those who don't know you and the work that you do, can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Omar Lopez. I am an instructional technology specialist in South Texas by the border. So I service 38 school districts along the border. So it's exciting to be here learning a little bit more about what we can take back to our teachers, to our students. We serve in underrepresented. I mean, we have English learners. The majority of our students are English learners, so we are in an area that needs help, and I'm here trying to learn as much as I can, take it back to our teachers, to our school districts. Thank you for for having me.
Yeah, and a big part of the conversation that they were just having, they were discussing equity in the classroom and providing access for students. And when students don't get that access, or when that access gets taken away from them, like what are the implications of that? Their opportunities to communicate, their opportunities to create, their opportunities to explore entrepreneurship, their opportunities to connect. How have you seen equity and access to technology play out? The struggles and the wins in the district that you're working in?
I'm so glad you asked that, because our students have so much to share, but sometimes they don't have the opportunity to really show us what they're learning, how they're doing, what they're feeling. So a lot of times technology breaks a barrier that is there because of language or because of the resources. So when that is taken away from them, they don't have that technology, what comes then? Then they'll start doing other things that create more of a challenge. Sometimes the equity is an issue because they might not have all the resources. Sometimes there's something else that they got to look for. So it's important for us to provide that to them so that they can continue to grow and just really be successful, not just as students, but as individuals in our society.
And so, is this, how many ISTEs have you been to? Because this is my first.
Oh, this is my fourth, actually. So I've been in San Antonio, Chicago, Philly, and then now here. We skipped the virtual one. So it's been good. It's a wonderful learning experience, just connecting with the other individuals that are really focused on helping others and bridging gaps. So it's been good. This has been a wonderful learning experience. The weather's been really, I guess, I'm in South Texas, so it's super hot as well, humidity, but just enjoying and connecting with other people, it's been wonderful.
Yeah, so what would you say the theme of today, given that it's the last day of ISTE, the theme is kind of like what's the big reflection, what's the big takeaway? So as you think about the sessions that you've gone to and the messages that you've heard and the people that you've connected with, what's your big takeaway from just these last few days so far at ISTE?
So I was just thinking about that, and I think the greatest takeaway is that we are here just as educators, as individuals trying to help others, and it's learning and connecting. And I think it's trying to, again, connect with the diverse learners. I think that's been really big. That's what I've understood. That's from what I've seen, is that we have all kinds of learners. We work with all kinds of people's diverse backgrounds, diverse cultures. So it's important for us to acknowledge the diversity and for us to tailor our instruction, our approach to make sure that we serve every child and our colleagues who we work with as well.
Yeah, and that's what I've enjoyed about hearing about a lot of ed tech companies, where it seems like a lot of people are just moving away from like, oh, look at this cool feature, or look at these little specs, or you can do X, Y, Z, but they're beginning to talk about like, how does this allow you to begin to reach every student? Because it's virtually impossible to reach every student without technology, without providing them options and ways that they can express themselves, or ways that they can choose to explore a topic, or ways that they can choose to communicate. And empowering them with that choice. And that's what I've been seeing, is just like there's a shift. I think a lot of these ed tech companies are catching on. Like, it's not just about the spec sheet. It's not just about the features and the new updates, unless those things are empowering the teachers to be able to do these things and connect with the vast variety of students that are in their classroom. So have you seen anything that has been exciting to you, that you're like, I'm so excited to share this with my team, or to work with other educators, or to do this myself?
I think the greatest news, and I'm super excited, on Monday's Flip Fest, they announced that they're going to have their mobile app in Espanol, which is wonderful right now. So even a lot of our teachers, a lot of the parents that we work with along the border, their main language is Spanish, but also that shows as an EdTech company, leading, being at the forefront of being more accessible and inclusive of other languages. They announced more languages coming soon, but just having that platform, even if it's on mobile and being accessible in Spanish, that's a big move. So that's super exciting for us, and I think for other educators around the world as well.
Well, Omar, if people want to keep up with you and see what you're up to, where can they find you?
I'm on Twitter at Omar Lopez 0207. That's where I share a lot of stuff, a lot of my sketch notes, because I'm a visual learner. So just having that platform to share is good. So yeah, Twitter will be good.
Well, thanks for coming on, Omar. All right, we are privileged that Ken and Holly are going to be sticking around with us in the next discussion, which is a panel called Wrapping Up ISTE Through the Lens of Equity. And they're joined by the founder of the Arab American Education Network and high school English teacher, Dr. Sawsan Jaber. And returning to the show is the author of Demarginalizing Design and the co-host of the Liberated Educator podcast, which he hosts alongside Mr. Ken Shelton. We have Dee Lanier.
So I just want to say, I am so honored to be getting to have this conversation with the three of you, because the brain power at this table is enormous. And we are so lucky to be able to hear from all three of you what it is that, if we're wrapping up ISTE in the lens of equity, what should we be thinking about with equity going forward? As we go into the next school year, as we try and dismantle systems, what would you say about equity through that lens?
Rock, paper, scissors? Who goes first?
Yeah, exactly. We all three of us have so much to say, and now we're all saying nothing.
Yeah, we're just trying to defer. I always want to defer to
Dr. Jaber.
Yes.
Oh, man, that's a lot of pressure, especially with this crowd. I think each of us obviously is very steeped in equity work in a lot of different ways based on our lived experiences. And for me, I think as a student growing up in this country, and as somebody who went through most of graduate school, never being really able to name my experiences in formal ways, my biggest shift has to be to stop working for students and start thinking about how we can work with them and with their communities, and really empowering and mobilizing the kids to be a part of that conversation in a lot of ways, shifting it to think about how we can involve them in the decisions that we make and empower them to understand this conversation, to be a part of the conversation, and to start shifting the status quo. I think that's a huge reframe, because it means taking the power that we've historically held as educators in the classroom and giving it back to the students, and and really taking a back seat and being more of a facilitator and letting them take the lead. And that has probably been the most powerful shift I've made as an educator in my 20 plus years as an educator. And I think seeing the power that the students hold, seeing what they're able to produce, hearing them take part in that conversation. And then I always tell my students, when you know, pass the information forward. Watching the students lead the conversation in their communities, challenging their administration, I think, which is what my students did last year. They were able to stand up in front of the entire district administration and say, here's what you're not doing for us and how you're not meeting our needs. Having them facilitate those conversations with their parents and help their parents arrive at new understandings, I think, was all huge. And it's much more powerful than me having a conversation with another adult, because when their children are challenging them and asking them questions and really able to have those conversations, those critical conversations in meaningful and powerful ways, it's transformative. And I always say, like, education will impact policy, right? Because if we have a generation of kids who understand inequity, understand oppression, understand marginalization, eventually we're all going to step down because we're going to get older and they're going to take over. And these are going to be our senators and our presidents and our lawyers and our Supreme Court judges and all of these different things, these different positions that hold the power and are able to really shift the conversation and contribute to it in large and meaningful ways.
This is why, right? Number one, this is why we defer.
That was a TED Talk for you all not paying attention at home.
That's number one. So even just thinking about the question, I always think of ways in which we can simplify what we're looking for or looking at, but that we also unpack the complexity of it. And so the examples that come to mind for me is whenever I think of, so how do we make sure this environment, ISTE itself, how do we make sure our education systems at large, how do we make sure our local schools, how do we make sure they're all equitable? I think of 3 R's, and they are just helping me look through the lens of equity. And the first one is is representation, right? It is what I can see with my eyes. Last time we were sitting in the hallway, all I do, and what I'm doing right now, I'm looking to see how many other people that look like me are here, right? That is incredibly important for my mental and emotional safety, more than anything. So is there representation? And with that representation, I know that there will be some relevance, at least with those who look like me, but then I'm also asking a question programmatically, where is representation, right? Where is that representation? But secondly, is it being responsive to my cultural identity and the cultural identity of others, and most especially of the students? And when you think of public schools, and around 80% of our student population in public schools in so-called urban areas are students of color. And so is the instruction, is what is expected of them, is it responsive to who they are and how they express themselves most comfortably, right? And then there's a last one, and it's a bigger one, and it's one that I think has just a larger question mark behind it, and that is, how are we instilling, or how are we creating opportunities for restitution? Right?
Speak about that.
Yeah, so restitution is paying back and giving back what has been taken, right? So if there has been things that have been taken from our community via appropriation, via even just talking about responsiveness and ways in which I may express myself culturally, and that has been vilified, that has been demonized, that has actually been disciplined often within our school systems. How do we not only, quote, reverse that? I'm putting all these quotes and asterisks next to statements because there's a lot that's there. But then how do we actually elevate them at their proper place and where they should be? And we should be celebrating, right? And we should start vilifying and demonizing the things that have been abusive or have been harmful to students of color and staff of color. And so restitution is all about creating restoration. And so that would be my 4th R to add to the mix. But oftentimes we stop at representation, not recognizing that we're just asking for people even put in positions of leadership to just go with the flow and to continue what has been already hurtful and harmful, and will continue to be unless it's addressed and changed. And so bigger questions that I think if we unpack them as a community, we can look at ways that we can make some of those changes.
Just a little side note to piggyback off of that, and representation, thinking about people who live in third spaces, right? Because oftentimes, even when there's equity as like a focus, representation often excludes, for example, Arab students,
Yes.
Asian students, and I think oftentimes I find myself missing in a lot of those conversations where there's intentional equity representation and conversation, and even in that narrative, right? So you don't have to have students who look like me to teach about our narrative, because these are kids that are going into a global world who need to understand the story, the single story, and the misrepresentation when they're interacting with or making decisions about or thinking about who to support politically with their tax dollars, or what all of those decisions that we have to make as American citizens, civically engaged American citizens. They need to understand these narratives in order for them to make those educated decisions. And so representation, not just in our mainstream, like I teach in a school as 80% Latinx students. When I talk and I teach in my classroom, I make sure to represent as many different groups and make sure that they understand that this is not an all-inclusive. So making sure that they also understand the narratives of people that look like them, seeing representation of themselves, but also understanding others, I think is huge.
Beautifully said. Nothing but concurrence.
Yeah, to kind of encapsulate what both Dr. Jaber and Dee shared, I think ultimately what I see missing that I certainly am hopeful for is an intentionality around what they both shared. I recognize that at a big conference like this, you have to have sessions that are the how-tos. My argument is even those how-tos can be appropriately representational, as Dr. Jaber, because a lot of people, first of all, let me be clear with this. Diversity is not a binary, and it cannot be defined in finite terms. There's a word, and it's funny because Dee is wearing a shirt that says, define CRT in a sentence. Oh, wait. And the reason why I'm saying this is because one of the 5 legal scholars that authored the critical race theory framework is Kimberly Crenshaw. And she coined a term that I love. Remember, I love the nuance of language. And it really ties in with what Dee and what Dr. Jaber just shared, and the term is intersectionality. And the whole idea around that is to encourage educators to really start to look at how the human condition cannot be a binary, is not a binary, and we should not be compartmentalized based on whatever our optics are, whatever our cultural identity is, what our background is. And the more that you recognize the importance around supporting students and asserting their own agency through civic engagement, I think that's one that I talk about that all the time. You got to support that. And then you get into, as Dee shared, the 3 R's. The main thing around that is the more that we support educators in recognizing and developing an awareness around those things, it can lead to the right degree of accelerated growth. And if you think about equity as a term, like, again, defining it, I define equity simply as access and opportunity. How are we providing access to a myriad of perspectives, a myriad of viewpoints, a myriad of lived experiences for the opportunity for us to be able to engage in learning that the catalyst, or part of the catalyst for that learning, is making meaningful cross-cultural connections. That's why when you don't make those connections, whether it's in a how-to session or in sessions that many of us do, what you do is you run the risk of people being able to be more easily compartmentalized and looking at learning, looking at the human condition as a binary. And then that's why when I always hear people say, well, this is divisive, I always follow up with, who's it dividing and why is it dividing them? What is the primary goal of that division? And then once we identify the goal, now we know where we can make efforts to dismantle it. So I'm certainly hopeful that the folks here at this conference going forward will begin to develop a stream of thought that extends far beyond just the how-to of a device or an app, or really even just the sessions they attended. Think about it in a larger social context.
Mm-hmm. Do you think big conferences like this do enough from your points of view? And how could they improve?
I'm gonna say no.
Okay.
I'm gonna say we're just barely, it's a drop in the ocean,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's so much more that can be done. And I think that's representative of who takes the main stage. Like, I was floored to see Dr. Cornell West. And I think that was a very powerful moment for every BIPOC person in the room. I would assume for many of us, it was a really powerful moment to hear him say a lot of the things he said, affirming and just validating, and I think also just powerful, right? To see somebody of his
Stature.
so many things,
message.
take the stage and speak unapologetically. I think that's new. I go to conferences all the time, and I think that was a really new experience, and it felt great. But I think, again, that representation is often barely touching the surface. It's not there, we have to see more of that. We have to see more of that diversity. It has to be more intentional, and it has to be really getting at the core of what equity work, more than just mitigative but transformative equity work, really getting to the core of what it takes to shift the powers in our communities, not just in our classrooms. I always say schools are community centers, and if we really are doing what we're supposed to be doing, we're serving entire communities that we reside in and we take space in. And so how are we talking about those conversations? It's beyond cultural responsiveness. It's beyond adding a diverse book in your curriculum. It's beyond hiring and quantifying how many BIPOC staff members you have and faculty members in your school and assuming that you've checked that off of your list. And it's beyond a 15-minute webinar, and it's not a one and done. It's a framework lifestyle change. It's systemic. It's from the top down, the bottom up, and all around. And it extends itself outside of the community in every possible way. And if we're not thinking about it in all of those ways, then we're not doing equity work, because it's not disrupting. It's a Band-Aid. And a Band-Aid can only last so long when you have a gashing wound that's bleeding, right? Like, it's not going to do anything. It's going to only hold up until you actually go get the right treatment that you need. And I don't know how many schools are really doing that work. So unless the organizers of massive conference like this start to think that way, that's where that conversation's missing from a lot of these spaces. And a lot of what we're seeing more of it.
Yeah.
But
it's more intentional, for sure.
For sure. But I definitely wouldn't say that we're where we need to be.
What advice would you give conferences?
I can answer that.
Yeah, I know Ken can for sure. So my first thought, not last thought, is language that I often utilize, because this is hard work and it's complex work. But first and foremost, just in education. So we understand certain things. There's some parallel language that we can utilize. People all know about, like, SAMR, right? We know how to evaluate tech and its use in classrooms, and so I say utilize something similar, and that's why I brought up, like, the 3 R's, and I say, what stage are we in at this place, in this point? So similarly to how it would be inappropriate to label someone, a teacher, as you are on the A level. No, in a particular activity and in a particular environment, they may utilize something that is on the S level. I say that you asked the first question or the previous question of, how are we doing here? And I'm like, well, let's define, like, at what point, at what place, when the main stage conversation, or excuse me, all of the main stage of yesterday, I thought, wow, I see the representation, I hear and feel the responsiveness, and I'm now also hearing with unapologetic language, even restitution. But that's just in this space. But what about the other spaces? So how do we evaluate where we are and what we're doing at each instance in every little venue? ISTE is huge, right? So how are we doing in a particular place at a particular time, and then how do we continue to level up? Because representation is just the very first step. So if we see representation, great, but you're not getting a cookie. And how do we level it up?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, to, again, encapsulate what Dr. Jaber and Dee shared, I think, one, you got to name a problem for what it is before you can fix it, period. And there are definitely significant efforts to maintain a degree of myopia, because I can absolve myself of any responsibility if I can performatively claim that I'm not aware of something. And it's like the horse with the blinders. I'm telling you how you can take those blinders off, and you are intentionally saying, I don't want to take them off. So for me, and this is something I always challenge educators. If you don't want to take the blinders off, then I'm going to force you to hold a mirror up there. You're still going to look at something that isn't what you've always been looking at. When it comes to the conferences like ISTE, big conferences in general, the advice I always give is, how are you ensuring that the program the presenters, the main stage folks are truly representational of, one, the educator workforce, and two, the students they serve. Because if, to Dee's point, if we were at conferences that, let's say their primary attendees are public school teachers, then 80% of the presenters should be those whose cultural identity is aligned with Black, Indigenous people of color. But I also recognize that you want to have a nice cross-representation. But my main thing is, how do you discern the difference between authenticity and performative natures around that? And it does you no good. I'm going to borrow a quote from James Baldwin, one of my personal heroes, who, by the way, I was never given the opportunity to read his writings in high school, outside of my dad having me do it. Why would I want to integrate into a burning house? The whole idea around the intentionality of diversity, and like Dr. Jaber shared, checking off a box. I can say that I know for a fact that I've been tokenized and I've been a checkbox when I go to a conference and there's more than 1,000 people there, and like Dee shared earlier, and I look around and I'm the only one. And so for me, it's not just the whole idea around ensuring equity, ensuring diversity, it's how are you ensuring that the very people that you are inviting into that space are safe and protected. And then once you have that, and we begin to dialogue with each other and make the connections and things of that nature, it then becomes this beautifully diverse space of which I always say, what do you need in order to ensure that the presenters and the attendees can bring their whole true authentic selves into that space? So the advice I always give conferences is, one, I'd like to see your representation of speakers. Two, what resource supports are provided to ensure the safety, both social and emotional safety of those speakers. How do I see it operationalized in the program? How do I see it operationalized in here you go, not just in the program, what room am I assigned to? What time is my session? I've been around for a while where my session on Tequity was rejected. Then it got accepted. Last session, last day, back of the conference center. Then it got accepted the next time. Very first session on the very second day at 8 a.m. So you see, it's the whole thing, because I know that some folks want to, again, remember, I always, bad faith actors versus good faith actors. I know you're in good faith if you're saying not only are we ensuring diversity of representation in the program and the content, but we're not taking those sessions and burying them at the worst possible time and or worst possible location.
I think it's effective when it becomes the norm and not the anomaly, right?
Exactly.
You're like, I think that feeling that we all have listening to Dr. Cornel West is indicative of the fact that this is not the norm for us, right? And so like I walk around here, and it's also about like who are we attracting to attend these conferences too? When you talk about like safety of spaces, that's what I think of, because I look around and I see almost nobody who looks like me. Not on the main stage, not in the sessions, not in the hallways. I'm oftentimes the only person who looks like me in a space like this. And that by itself brings a whole level of discomfort and pressure, because I feel like I have this responsibility to represent. Because when I speak, people are looking at me, and I'm dismantling so many single story stereotypes just by being present in these spaces. So that's a lot of pressure for one person, right? And it's only my story. It's not every Arab Muslim woman's story.
I want to tell you, a Muslim woman walked by while we were here, and I was choking back tears, because she was so proud to see you at this table having this conversation. And it was a beautiful thing to see. But it goes to what you're talking about. She shouldn't have to walk by and be proud. It should be normalized. And that's where we need to get to.
Yeah, that represents, like, what I wanted to show everybody today was I walked by a booth in the expo hall and saw a little pin with a hijabi girl wearing jeans and a shirt. And I was like emotionally touched, because I think this is the first time in my life, and I'm 42 years old, that I see an accurate representation of a Muslim American girl.
Looks like your daughter.
She looks like my daughter.
She looks like your
in
daughter.
my life. This is the first time. Like, that's so huge.
What was the company?
Lexia Learning, and kudos to
Shout
them.
out.
And that's
Kudos to
it.
them.
And here's the thing, that's in the vendor hall, and that's a pin. Now take that and amplify that to Dr. Jaber is now on the main stage or delivering a session. Now extrapolate that to, again, like you shared, like Dr. Jaber shared, when you are intentional and authentic, it's not the anomaly, it's not the oh my God,
Yeah, that's what
it's normalized. It has to be normalized. It really does.
And what Ken was also communicating about authenticity and having good faith actors versus bad faith actors, I mean, one of the things that come to mind for me is I intentionally utilize the language of responsiveness versus relevance, not that they're opposed because they're very much similar, but oftentimes they're used interchangeably. And Ken and I have lots of discussions around words really, really matter. And within normal context, I recognize that relevance means in my layman terms, it means that it's relevant to me, it can appeal to me, I can understand it, something like that. Well, if there's someone who is very remote from my experience, their ability to communicate something relevantly is going to be limited based on their very limited experience, exposure, and opportunity to do so. But being responsive is actually, even just in the language, it is posturing yourself with humility and listening. And then communicating or acting in a more relevant way because you're responding to something that you are understanding that I need to learn more about and to understand on the cognitive and emotional heart level. And so that's why I elevate the language of responsiveness, because we're not going to get representation like that, and we're not going to get relevance for sure like that. But if we have a heart and emotional, and even on the leadership level, if we have a responsiveness of learning, then we can actually do some things that are more relevant within our setting.
Well, I have to say, I knew this would end way too soon. This should have been 4 sessions in a row, because the brain power at this table and the experience that you bring, there's not enough time. But I'm super happy to have had this conversation. We need to wrap it up, but I just want to know, is there anything you feel you need to say to wrap this up?
I said mine.
I yield my time to Dr. Jaber's brilliance.
Okay.
Oh man, I don't have anything to add to this. Like, there's so much to say, right? Like when you're talking about the equity conversation, I just think it's something that we can go on and on and on, because there's so many inequities in every space that we occupy, and especially as educators, I think it's a question of who you're bringing into those spaces. How do you retain those people? Because there's so many of us. Like, I attended the first iGrow Summit, which was the first BIPOC conference, leadership conference in Illinois, and it was such a completely different space, because you're in a space where there's only people who look like you, even though I was still the only Arab and the only Muslim in that space then too, but like other BIPOC teachers, and there's a shared experience there. And I think there was a representative there from the Illinois State Board of Education who stood up and said, where Illinois is starting this new grant to help 300 BIPOC teachers become principals. And in my mind, I was just thinking to myself, how many BIPOC teachers are already in spaces and they have their leadership credentials, but the gatekeepers will not allow them to grow in those spaces. So before we start thinking that we're taking on these new initiatives and we're being so responsive to the needs, and we're equitable, and we're this PR moments that Illinois State Board of Education is taking to really highlight their commitment to changing the way they've thought historically, let's look at the problem that we really have that already exists. So I approached him and I said, hey, I just want to ask you a question. Like, did you ever think that there's already teachers out there who have credentials and are overqualified, but your superintendents that are primarily white and the people who make the decisions will not allow them to grow because they're the gatekeepers? What are you doing to solve that problem? And he just looked at me like 6 question marks, no answer. He said, would you like to be on a committee? Of course, because we have to do the work to change the narrative. Because if we're not doing the work, if we're not telling that story, if we're not standing in those committees and serving on 15 different committees and wearing 10 different hats, where you're constantly being re-traumatized in these spaces and then demonized for being the angry black or brown person on the table, and often the only voice in that space who's speaking that among a sea of whiteness, then the work isn't happening, right? And so I think all of that warrants attention, and people really need to look at the core of the problem and not the optics of what they want it to be, because it's an easy fix or another Band-Aid, right? And so there's so much. A drop in the ocean.
I'm sorry for the shortness of this session, because I am learning so much. So thank you, everyone, for coming, and maybe next year it'll be all day. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. you.
We're really privileged and honored to have all the speakers that came with us. And I was speaking with the team yesterday. Everyone that was on that panel speaks and does featured speaking and keynotes and everything like that. And then just hearing and listening to the conversation is just like, oh, okay. I could see they're doing exactly what they are gifted at doing, and so they speak in a way that you want to hear the message, and it's a message that we need to hear. And so we are thankful that we are even able to put on this live stream to provide a platform for some of these conversations, and we would not have been able to do this without the support from Adobe. And so Adobe actually here at ISTE has a big old booth that Sam went to go check out yesterday that had kind of a cool little activity, creative activity that they were able to do. So let's take a look to see what Sam ended up doing.
Estamos aquí con Alberto Herraiz de eTwins. Y Alberto, eres de España, ¿no?
Soy de España, sí.
Qué bueno, que estudié en España también, así que ya. Ahí ya agarré no sé si todavía tengo acento, pero...
Sí, agárrase.
We should probably speak English.
Yeah. So let's switch to English.
And right now working at Adobe with this contraption right here. It says, share the joy of creativity. Tell me what's going on. Why do we have these desks on the ceiling?
So the idea is you flip the classroom, right? You flip the classroom to think differently. So that's why we have it's flipped. So we have the desk on the ceiling and the ceiling on the floor. So the idea you take a picture right there with the signs upside down because you are falling, and then you remix that template with the QR code that we have there, and then you create this awesome picture that I'm sure you have seen on social media because it's everywhere right now. Be creative, that's step number one, okay? Think about how you want to be on the picture. Right now we have this example that they are jumping because they want to be in the middle of the falling, Yeah. But other people do a Spider-Man, different
Don't tell me too much, because I gotta,
He's gonna steal the idea.
I like remixing other ideas, but I want to think of something here.
Sorry, I'm killing your creativity right now.
I gotta go, you know me, creativity for all, let's do it. All right, I can't grab on this, I can't hang off this? Okay, that would be funny, but I could sit down. This is gonna be me, I could do thinking person.
So that it appears correct. All right.
So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna scan this QR code, and then it's gonna give me the template that I can remix with the image that we just saw Alberto take. So scanned it, and all right, now I got this design. So let's take it back to our place. We're gonna make this into something awesome. So we're back at our Airbnb here in New Orleans, and I'm going to try to remix this design so that we can see what I can come up with. All right, so what I'm gonna do here is hit this green remix this design button. This works, okay, so it's taking me over to Adobe Creative Cloud Express. Okay, now that I am signed in, I'm gonna hit, let's see, I'll try this, remix this template again. And what should happen now is that, yes, now I have an editable template to be able to use here. So it looks like what I'm gonna need to do here, I'm guessing, is replace this in some way. That's how most of these templates work. So I'm gonna click this, and then let's see, there's a replace button there. And let's check the photo library. We can check out some of those pictures. All right, so I took this one. Oh, and yeah, I already flipped that guy upside down, so I'm gonna replace that with me. That came in like me there, upside down. That looks pretty cool, actually. We could zoom in, kind of check that out. That looks fun. And oh, look, my sign is right side up. That's cool. Oh, I can even tilt it like that. It's got the kind of pinch tilt. All right, let's just enhance it and see if I can do some things here. I could take some saturation. I can make it more color saturated right there. It's kind of fun. Hit done. And let's see what else do I want to do. Let me check out. Ooh, I'll sharpen it. I definitely like sharpen. Get it even sharper. Cool. Hit done. And check out what the warmth does. Oh, okay, so yeah, it's making the colors a lot less or more warm. I like that. It looks good. Pretty cool. That's fun. all right, I like it. If I had some more time, I could even do lots more stuff to manipulate this image. But right now, I think it looks pretty cool. It's kind of artistic looking and pretty neat effect that I'm upside down. These and lots of other Adobe Creative Challenges are available on their website. You can do this kind of stuff with your students just to practice some basic design skills. It doesn't have to be this full-blown project, just a small little creativity assignment, and it's pretty fun.
Adobe is always providing really super fun and creative ways to express yourself with tools like Adobe Express, which we're really big fans of. But our next session, this actually leads perfectly into our next session. This session is titled The Perfect Blended Lesson. And Sam, Kary, and Holly Clark are sitting down with an educator of nearly 30 years, the co-creator of Teachers Give Teachers, the co-author of the HyperDocs handbook, Miss Lisa Highfill.
Lisa, it's great to have you on. Now, before we get into the conversation, I'd like you to help us out with a little contest. So Tom and I have been creating these graphics. You know, there's these ISTE Adobe Challenge graphics, and we each created one. So what we need you to do right now is take a look at them and tell us which one is better.
Okay.
Okay. Now this is a straight up. We want to know which one is better. This is not, you know, you're not being nice here.
Oh no,
or
I have
anything like
opinions.
that. Okay. So I'm going to give you an iPad here, and all you're going to do is just swipe and take a look. So that's obviously Tom. So take a close look. Take your time.
It's very nice, Tom.
Really evaluate
Yes.
it. Yep.
Did you have some po' boys? Nice. You're going to eat some po' boys. Nice. This is fine. Get your nerd hat on. Nice. Okay.
Now you swipe to the next one. Do you see me there? Let's see. There we go. What do you think about that one?
Oh yeah. This one's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like this one.
What do you like about it?
Well, they want to learn more about how to use HyperDocs.
Okay.
And and you want to talk about HyperDocs. So I really like this one. The design is clean, and you're just on point with your topics.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree. That one is clearly superior.
And I see you have my book in front of you because you might see me reading the book. Yeah, this is definitely. Oh, and you're most excited to meet me at ISTE. I just saw that part. Hands down winner.
Sorry, Tom.
Sam, that was a masterclass in knowing your audience.
Reading the room.
Well, now I do get to meet you and chat about HyperDocs.
Love it.
And actually, I have your book, the HyperDoc Handbook, in front of me. A book you co-authored with Sarah Landis and Kelly Hilton, who I also just found out are here. That's so fun.
Yeah.
And we also just found out that I grew up very close to where you teach. So
Yeah,
that's
what
pretty
a
cool.
small world. I tell you, it's good to slow down and just talk to people here.
Absolutely.
What you find out is amazing.
Absolutely. Now, you wrote this book, deeply influential book for the way that teachers approach lesson design. You wrote it back in 2016, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes.
I'm curious, what was the impetus to write the book? Why did you think there was a need for teachers to learn how to do lesson design in this way?
Well, prior to that, a couple of years prior to that, that was the big push. We were getting a lot of Chromebooks in the classroom. A lot of teachers were getting Chromebook carts with everyone on a device, and they really didn't know what to do with it. They were the kids were all getting their Chromebooks, typing in URLs and not getting to the sites they wanted, and they were doing these one-off activities that the teachers felt didn't really enhance their teaching. And we wanted to pull together that aspect of good instruction with using a device for really good learning experiences for students. And so that's kind of what started it. And we started doing these digital lessons, HyperDocs are digital lessons, in the classroom. And every time we would talk, we were like, I did this digital lesson, and it sounded so weird to say that. We're like, we should call it something so it's easier to just talk about it. And we went round and round with names, and then we came up with the name HyperDoc, like by accident, because we were talking that it's alive, alive, and it's a document. And it's stuck. And so we decided to write about it and share with people because word of mouth, it spread for a couple of years before the book in 2016. So
You're telling me that the word hyper and HyperDoc means alive? I always thought it was a hyperlink. Is that not where the name comes from?
Hyper is
Interesting.
alive, like We just thought it was never about being a link. It was about being alive, because when you give a worksheet to a student, you can't change it. We call them dead worksheets. The minute you print it, you're like, oh, I wanted to change that. That lesson didn't go well. And you have to like retype it, reprint it, and make a whole class set. But this, I could go back into any kind of a digital document, change it on the spot while the kids are actually working. And that's where that word hyper came from, alive.
That is so interesting. I wonder if that also has to do with how people perceive HyperDocs sometimes. And I know that you're very intentional about clarifying what a HyperDoc is and what a HyperDoc is not.
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong as well, that it came from a place where teachers at the time were doing internet scavenge type activities that perhaps were not intentional, and the HyperDoc was a way to kind of make something like that where you're using lots of different resources, apps, and things like that more intentional. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was about pulling together good instruction and a powerful cycle of learning. I worked with Ramsey Musalem about the cycles of learning and putting a structure to your digital lesson to guide students on tech, off tech. The teacher guides the student through this lesson in a powerful way for the learning to stick. So that means first they would explore the concept, then the teacher would explain the concept, or it would be embedded in the lesson, and then apply the concept. So explore, explain, apply is this base structure to the lesson that you build in those aspects of it. And that is the game changer from it. That's what makes it different than a document with links or a worksheet or just a document that has a lot of links to tasks to do.
Right.
It's not a to-do list. There's an actual ebb and flow to it that's really purposeful for deep learning.
Now, this term, HyperDoc, is something that obviously you all coined. I imagine it's gained in popularity to an extent where it's probably you've lost some ownership over it. It's out there in the world. I'm curious if you see it being misapplied sometimes to certain types of lessons or documents that people are referring to as a HyperDoc, but that maybe don't actually meet the qualifications of a HyperDoc.
You know, we never thought that the world would change so quickly. We were, hoping teachers would shift to digital learning with lessons. When the pandemic hit and schools shut down, teachers did find HyperDocs to be a really important answer to their instruction. But the word got away from us, definitely. It's become its own word, it's sort of like Xerox. Everything's a Xerox machine or a Post-it. I mean, it's not that popular, but everyone calls a digital lesson a HyperDoc, whether it's based off of our version of a HyperDoc or not. Ours is all about that explore, explain, apply. So I can look at one right away, and if there isn't that structure to it, I know it could be a digital worksheet. And I encourage people to think critically as lesson designers. When you see a HyperDoc, that's the first thing I ask you to look for. Do you see the lesson design in it? If not, can you add it back in? It's not about finding the perfect lesson. It's about looking at it, being inspired by it, and you designing it. You're the designer. Lesson design is very personal. And you should bring your craft of designing instruction for your kids to that lesson.
You specifically say explore, explain, apply as essentially a sequence. When you're talking about explore, if you could actually explain a little bit what that means and how that is different from explain. And I think we can probably tie in Holly's work around constructivist learning here as well, and the understanding that students need to explore before explaining. But what does that mean? What are you supposed to do to explore before you explain?
I'm going to say this, how teachers tend to really understand this. When they come into the classroom and they sit down and they just say, just tell me what to do. They're used to the teachers starting from the front, giving instructions, then handing out the work, and the kids doing the work, and then assessing the work and moving on. What we're doing is we're switching it around. We're asking the kids to actively engage in cognitive thinking from the onset of a lesson and to make meaning of the concept you're teaching, the standard, the objective, before you explain it. It's like a mystery. It's like solving a riddle. You don't give the answer to the riddle. You let them sit in it. You let them ponder. I always say I let them sit in the struggle of it a little bit. And at first, when I first give them to students, they don't love that. They're like, just give me the worksheet. Just tell me what to do. But that is the work of learning, is sitting in the struggle. I always say, then, it's like exercising. You got to do a little bit, feel the pain a little, not pain, but feel the stretch. And that's when you really know you're learning. So we ask kids to explore a concept and try to make meaning of it first. Now, we don't just let them go on that. It's really important that you bring your craft as a teacher to that HyperDoc lesson. So after that little short a period of time to explore, maybe I give them 10 minutes to 20 minutes, whatever amount of time we have. It might be the whole class lesson if it's a big exploration. I have expectations for that. They have to share out, what did you discover? What do you now know about this concept? That's my very first formative assessment. Really quick, on the spot, I can see how much they know about this concept. That informs me before I go into the explanation. I can they did not get it at all. I need to revise their understanding, or I need to go deeper because I want them to get it at a higher level. Or maybe they do all already know the concept, and I can speed through it or take them to a different angle of it when I get to the explain portion of the lesson. And that is maybe the explain portion of the lesson. Could be direct instruction. It might be my lecture. It might be where, again, I build in a digital feature. Maybe it's a video they're watching. If I were to teach them a math concept, I might teach it live, but in the explain portion, I might put a video of that lesson as well. It's back to my old days of flip teaching, because I used to flip teach back in 2010.
Yeah.
And so I embed that flip teaching right in the explain portion, because when I'm thinking about universal design for learning, I want to build a lesson that meets all students' needs. So if they don't hear me during the live lesson, I want to build in the resource where they have that agency to know where to go back and hear that information again if they didn't get it. Kids need to hear the concept over and over again. So I want to build that feature in. And when we say design lessons with purpose and intention for all learners, that's what we're talking about. It really helps my language learners as well. I make my videos and they know how to change the closed captioning to their language so they can understand my lesson as well. In YouTube, that's my favorite feature.
Yeah.
And so that's a really important distinction, that there is concrete instruction happening, but I didn't give away the joke beforehand, like someone else who just had a little joke with me today. Because it's sort of like telling them what's in the prize, in the package before you let them open it. That's the joy of learning. Let them discover, let them have inquiry-based learning for real.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You mentioned, I'm curious to explore this a little bit more in the explain phase, the potential to have lecture, the potential to have that be a video that you create and then is essentially something that students can access, and that actually allows us to implement some of the checkpoints in UDL around being able to changing some options for perception with closed captioning, the ability to go back, rewatch that information. Now with loads of different apps to be able to add some interactivity questions to scaffold for understanding and make sure that there are some checkpoints for students to be able to monitor their own understanding, which helps build self-awareness and things like that. Do you think that there is an argument to be made that at this point we should be shifting essentially to video-based lessons for those reasons, or does live lecture, that sort of more traditional stand in front of the classroom and teach a mini lesson, still have a place in this vision that you have for a HyperDoc?
I see both. And I really want to emphasize, sometimes people are overwhelmed by HyperDocs and think that I have to do a HyperDoc for every single lesson. And that's not the case. I always tell people, when you want a concept to really stick, something that they just need to know, it's an essential standard, you're moving on to the next grade level next year, I need you to know this and really have this down this year. Those are the ones I would make the videos of. Those are the ones I would build in the additional support. The parents watch these videos as well. They're able to be a partner at home with the students that aren't feeling the success that everyone else is feeling. So I don't think you have to do it for all of them. I think there's still a place for quick mini lessons in the classroom that are live, away from tech, off of tech. And I think there's this balance you do. A lot of one thing is never good. And so I always try to create this balance. I don't want to create HyperDoc fatigue in the classroom. Not another HyperDoc, because then they just start to see it as another, they see it. I have to train their thinking. They're used to a worksheet and they think they could just fly through it. And these are different. And so I control their flow through this HyperDoc lesson. It's not for them to complete in 10 minutes and say, I'm done.
Integrating live instruction with technology-based instruction is blended learning, essentially, the way that you both define blended learning. As far as I understand it, there has been, I think, a misconception about what it means now to teach with technology, that when you say that equates to remote teaching. And I wonder if you've seen that also taking place, that now there's a feeling like that type of lesson planning is only for remote teaching. And if you're feeling a kind of need to go out there in the world and say no, and same I think applies for you. I'm curious to hear what you think as well, that you're now you're in this kind of place that must be so frustrating. Like, I still have to go back now and make the argument that when we're back in person, we should still use the technology, that it's not just for remote instruction. Is that something you're experiencing?
Well, I think I'm experiencing, and everyone is experiencing, the idea of screen time being blended learning. Like, the kids are on the screens and the parents don't want them on the screens and the students themselves don't want to be on the screens. And it's not about screen time, it's about the task. And if the task is well developed the way that Lisa talks about, then no one will care about the screen time. The screen time is just part of the experience. But when screen time is consumption, and I'm going to Zoom school, and that's not what we want. We don't want kids at Zoom school. We want kids doing greater things. And Lisa actually is involved with the Virtual Online Learning Academy. And I think you should talk about how you're not doing Zoom school, how blended, like the experience you're trying to bring to those children.
Yeah, it's definitely really listening to students and listening to where is their engagement and how do you get them to join in a conversation, and how do you get, especially in a virtual environment, how do you connect everyone when they're all over the place? And so you build in that's part of the design. You build it in yourself, depending on who are the kids in front of you. And a lot of times I want them at home writing in their writer's notebook. So I will definitely design that into the apply portion or into the explain portion. I'll give them tasks, and then we will build off of those moments. But I think it's really important to have this balance of on tech, off tech, and really be clear for expectations. We need to get away from thinking and just assigning tasks, because what we're doing is we're creating students who come in, wait to be told what to do, and they're not building agency for learning. Mm-hmm. And they're not able to critically think and be self-starters and to take risks with their learning or build this curiosity. I talk a lot about embedding curiosity into my HyperDoc. People say, well, I want kids to be curious. And I work with kindergartners through 12th graders. There's a huge difference. But they're all curious. It's what you give them. So when I hear people say, oh, those older kids, they lose their creativity, I think, well, maybe you should give them something to be curious about. Maybe you should build that into your lesson and then see what happens. Mm-hmm. And they go right back to being like the 5-year-old, like little geeking out. They love it. But I think it's changing it up and getting excited over your own lessons. And you be a creative designer. You bring that passion that you have for your subject matter, or for learning, for that matter, to your lesson design. And I think you will see a change in your students.
Such an important point about the importance for adults, teachers, to also explore their creativity. That lesson design can actually be an avenue through which you explore creativity. And we know, we're talking here at ISTE, there's so many presentations about the importance of creativity in students. Well, it's important in everyone. And so we're facing right now a crisis in the teaching profession. we need to figure out how do we engage teachers. And I'm not suggesting it's the panacea to every issue, but it seems like something that if we could put more agency and tools in teachers' hands and really encourage teachers to create as opposed to kind of give them prescribed, you're doing it this particular way, that could bring some joy back to teachers and that joy translates directly back into the classroom. Do you think that that's true?
That's really true, and I'm going to take it a step further. I've been reading in the news every day that we're getting to more and more prescribed. I'm going to tell you what you have to teach in your classroom. These are the standards you have to teach. And people feel locked in, and they're losing that drive and that excitement for being a creator of a learning experience. And I'm going to ask teachers to try a HyperDoc lesson that you design and design their standards and content that they want you to cover within that lesson, but bring in that engagement and that excitement and that community where you pull ideas of all your students together in one place through this design. I think you'll see that you're not just going there and being the robot teacher. You are bringing your passion to teaching because you crafted a really special learning experience for them. That's why I say you don't want to do them every day. It takes a lot. So sometimes I encourage teachers to do one a month or one a quarter or trimester, however you teach, and then watch the kids' reaction and study them. I think that's another part to it I don't talk about enough. When you give your lesson plan, you give the lesson to the kids, it gives you time away from the front of the room. That was why I love flipped teaching, because I wasn't standing up in front of the room. I'm walking around the room. I'm studying my students as learners. I'm sitting with those who are struggling. I actually have time to connect with them personally. It removes me from being the one that is just trying to control students into compliance of sitting there and paying attention. And I'm with them in that. And I think that's something that I encourage people to, even if you feel locked into a system that is just telling you, but I can't do this, I have to teach this lesson. I take my textbooks all the time and HyperDoc a lesson from it. And I just feel like that was so much better. I feel so much better today. That was so fun. And the kids are like, can we do that again? And it kind of motivates me to say, I want to bring that excitement because they're reacting pretty well to this.
Yeah, absolutely. I've done the same exact thing, build HyperDoc based off of my textbook or have a textbook become one of the resources in the Explore phase or something like that.
Exactly.
There are lots of ways you can do it, definitely. If somebody's interested in getting started with HyperDocs, what would you suggest to them? Where should they go to find some resources to help them out?
So we have built a fully asynchronous academy at hyperdocs.co. And we have made every single video lesson along with examples and written portions to it so teachers can learn it on their own. The other place they can go, I encourage them to go, is to the HyperDoc Facebook group, which that is actually where I first met you, Sam. Sam is a big contributor to our Facebook group. He knows the power of that group, don't you, Sam?
Definitely.
Isn't it an amazing place?
Absolutely, yeah.
It blows me away, those teachers in there, because they're so giving. And I love those natural conversations. Some people don't want to go and do a lesson, It's like joining a gym. Like, I have to go now, to all the, often. But the conversation around lesson design is that collaboration that many teachers are just craving and missing. Maybe they don't have that at their school. And you can find that in this group, in this unique setting. And you can find, that maybe you're going to find that science teacher that you like to share lessons back and forth with. And that's the place to do it.
It's teachers coming together, collaborating, sharing resources so you're not out there on your own and you can take advantage of the internet and share with teachers all around the world what you've created and build your archive slowly over time. I think that was an important point you made as well, that it's not about you're suddenly shifting to now you're doing this 100% of the time. Maybe you find one place in a quarter. And if you join something like HyperDocs Facebook group, then you can just add to your repertoire of activities a lot faster. So thank you so much, Lisa, for coming on. If we want to find more information about you, the folks who are watching this right now, where should we go?
Well, I tend to hang out on Twitter. I'm L Highfill on Twitter. That's where you can find me. I'm not the most chatty social media person, but I also have Teachers Give Teachers at TS Give TS on Twitter and in the Facebook group or hyperdocs.co. You can reach out to me. I really love connecting with educators, one teacher at a time. It's my motto.
We definitely have to have a follow-up conversation. I can't wait to chat with you again in the future, Lisa. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me. It's great to meet you in person finally.
Absolutely. You as well.
Thanks so much, Lisa. I really enjoyed the conversation as far as teachers being creative, because I found that's when I was the most excited in the classroom, when I was thinking like, okay, how can I create this esports project for my students, or how can I create this YouTube video production class for my students, or how can I create a sumo robot that I'm going to compete with my students in the actual sumo robot competition in my robotics class. And that excitement with creativity is contagious. I'm looking at Lisa over here. She's nodding at me. So she's like, yes. So I'm really glad that came up in the conversation. And even though Sam's Creative Cloud Express graphic won, I did have fun creating it and playing around with Adobe Express. I did look back to see a couple other folks that created one. Omar Lopez from a little bit earlier, he created his own right here as well, so you can see what he is all about. And then Claudio Zavala, he came on yesterday. This is his right there. He's interested in learning a little bit more about 3D printing. And our next guest actually created one as well. I was trying to pull it up. You may have seen this flash on the screen for 1 second during the last session, because I was like, maybe Michael has one. And he says, it says, let's talk about Web 3. And so that's what I'm actually pretty excited about with this next conversation, which is Web 3. And it's very interesting because it reminds me, I remember going back and watching an interview with Jeff Bezos from 1998, and it was like Dateline or something, and they're like, so what's this company, Amazon? You're going to use the internet to sell books? And it was like, he was just trying to explain like how the internet was going to change commerce, and people were just like, I don't get it, like, and trying to understand it. And now in hindsight, it's like, it's so clear, and he was just ahead of the curve. He saw it coming, and I feel like a lot of the conversations around Web3 are in the same way. It's like there's something coming. This is the next generation of the internet. This is not a fad, and this impacts education as well. And so it's like, if you were a teacher in 1998 and they're like, the internet's going to change the way you teach, you're like, man, it's like, we need to be listening. We need to be ready for these changes and excited about them, because it's gonna change the way we teach and change the way things happen in our classroom. And so I'm really excited. Sam Kary is going to be sitting down with the Director of Innovation at the Hebrew Academy of Miami, the author of Educated by Design, the co-founder of Ed3 Educators and Ed3 DAO, Michael Cohen, or as you may know him, the Tech Rabbi.
Michael, it's great to have you here on the live stream. We're here on the last day at ISTE Live 2022 in New Orleans, and I'm curious what's something that's excited you. You've probably been all out and about in this conference over the last few days. What's something you've seen, presentation you've been a part of that you've liked?
So for me, it's just the people. And I shared this a number of times. If you're an educator and you're at ISTE right now, you're all in on education. It's been a really rough couple years. People are exhausted, burned out. And so after, especially this year, that the world said, we just have to get back to status quo, get back everything that we have gone through over the past couple years. You need to go teach, and you need to do that, and there shouldn't be any issues, shouldn't be any lapse in anything. That's soul sucking for most educators. So to see so many educators here, it's incredible. That for me, I mean, sessions, tech, what people here are all in on education.
Agreed. Yeah, I think we found there were about 14,000 attendees at ISTE this year, which is an amazing number of educators coming together. Couldn't agree more. And also to meet people in person, like meet somebody like you who I've followed and known about, but to be able to sit down and chat with you is amazing. Now, we're going to have a conversation today about Web3, why Web3 is important, why we should care about it. To start, I think let's clarify for our audience, sort of assuming that folks don't know some of the base terminology or that it's a little bit sticky, which might actually be part of the point, that there's some kind of inherent complexity built into it. But just for the sake of being able to use terms, let's see if we can clarify something. So I'm going to give it a shot. Okay, so see if my definition of Web3 is correct. Feel free to make any edits that are needed. So my understanding of Web 1 is essentially that Web 1 is information-based internet. It's sort of the first iteration of the internet where people go online to access information. Web 2 emerges once the sort of social media giants come onto the scene and we start using the internet to interact more. But a major criticism of Web 2 is that control is sort of located in those companies. They own our data, we're on their platforms. So Web 3 is really an attempt to regain some of that control, to have more ownership with the individual users, to create a more decentralized internet. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Okay.
You're hired.
Now, NFT, I'm a little bit less clear on. I do know what it is, but not sure if I can give the same kind of summary. It stands for non-fungible token. And essentially what it is it's a way for a person to have that kind of ownership. So if we're trying to own something, you can authentically own it. And the way that it's owned is because it's located somewhere on the blockchain. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And blockchain is also what we're referring to when people are talking about cryptocurrency. So it's all essentially interconnected. Like you can't have Web3 without blockchain, without crypto, without NFTs. Would you say that's correct?
100%.
Okay, cool. All right, so blockchain, if you had to describe the blockchain, just so people can understand, how is it that people have ownership of something and it's no longer owned by like Facebook? Because I think most people's understanding of the internet is probably still that it is rooted in a company owning something where you're hosting your own content on that platform, like we are right now on YouTube, right? That could deplatform us at any time and decide, that we no longer have that content, right? So how does the blockchain change that?
Yeah, not just deplatform, demonetize.
Correct.
Decide that it's not in their best interest and switch the algorithm to something that they feel people want to see, even though you've brought value for so many years, so many hundreds of episodes. It's mind-blowing, but we have to also be a little bit grateful because they gave us the internet for basically free. So the ownership piece is really about transitioning this idea that our data is incredibly valuable. And it allows for commerce, it allows for communities to move forward and be successful and thrive. But why is it centralized in a small group of companies that, even though they've provided us value, they are taking so much of the profits based on what we're able to contribute, which is their entire platforms. The blockchain, I actually started to create a list of terms that I hoped a fifth grader could understand, because there's a lot of jargon, there's a lot of buzzwords, and with blockchain, you just basically have to look at it as a large network of people committed to making sure that information is stored, it's validated, it's transparent, and that anyone that puts it onto this network, we agree that that person that authors that content and puts it onto the blockchain, they own it. And so no one can take it, no one can move it. It is there, and if someone would, so to speak, delete it from one of the nodes of this larger network, there's another cluster of that larger network that has that data to refresh it and make sure that it's still there. And so there's no loss, right? I don't know when, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, basically the entire internet went down because Amazon Web Service had some sort of like massive crash. So WhatsApp went down, Facebook went down, Instagram went down, which are all Facebook meta companies that are on Amazon Web Service. So there's this massive centralization of access, of data, of control, of algorithmic decision making. And the blockchain is trying to put that back into the hands of the people so that you can use this secure network to get things done similar to Web 2. We're not we're not going like Ready Player One tomorrow, but being able to have that system in place, similar to an Amazon Web Service where or a Google Drive, but you get to own it and the community gets to support you in ensuring the integrity of all of that.
We're going to talk about the implications for education soon. I'm curious, before we talk about education, to talk more globally. Why do you think there's been such a backlash against the idea of cryptocurrency, against NFTs? It seems like every time you open up the news or check out a news magazine, there's some article decrying it or the death of it, and there's been a massive backlash to this idea of decentralization, or at least a backlash to NFTs and crypto. But the idea of decentralization actually seems pretty good. So why that backlash?
Some of the backlash is justified. There are plenty of groups getting together trying to use this technology for quick profit. It's called a pump and dump, where you create a coin and it conceptually has some sort of value in implementation, but there's no actual proof of the implementation, just conceptually. And that will go from like 0.000001 all the way to like, even if it's like, you know, a fraction of a penny, that like level of growth could make someone a millionaire overnight. But on the backs of all of the people that have to carry the bag, which is a term for the person that buys in a little too late and sells a little too late and ends up being the one that is allowing these others to profit. So there is some things like that, and you know, anyone that's going to try to like avoid that kind of reality, they're just not being genuine about it. But when you look at what crypto is able to do, it is able to allow for societies across the globe to connect in a more efficient way, to transact, to engage in commerce. You know, you have a global team working. We have a team right now that stretches in Europe, Dubai, Hawaii, Singapore, with the Ed3 work that we're doing. And when it's time to pay people for their hard work, it's like, oh, this wire transfer and this and that, and switching to this currency, and oh, don't do the dollar yet because the dollar is, you know, or our currency's down. It's a headache. And so what this technology is trying to do is basically say, if we can build a network that has some sort of purpose, we can then extract value from what that network does. So for Bitcoin, the value is quick, easy financial transactions. Even with Ethereum is making it possible for people to transact and trade digital goods in a way where all of the parameters are set and unchangeable with the contracts. You don't have to worry that you're going to get something that you didn't sign up for, or the terms are going to change. So when the war in Ukraine happens, the amount of time it would take to raise fiat currency and deliver it on the ground to the people that were trying to support the people of Ukraine, they already 2 weeks prior to that had raised in about 2 minutes, I think $50 million in Ethereum, transferred it in about 5 minutes to these different nonprofits that we're trying to support, and those people were able to take that, convert that, and get things done. Because we're still not in a world where you could actually like go buy goods with Ethereum, but we're getting there. So it's really trying to make sure that people understand that these cryptocurrencies that are attached to these large blockchain systems are trying to do something good in the world. But you have to do your own research. You have to understand, well, wait a second. Like, why am if I don't know anything about cryptocurrency and all of a sudden I hear about this thing, it's most likely too late, and you should definitely not buy into, you know, the next dog. You know, you got Dogecoin, you got Shiba Inu. You know, what's the next puppy that's gonna, you know, break onto the scene? So there's a lot of these like kind of crazy fantasiful, I don't know, I'm losing words here, but it's like that's not what we're trying to do here, and that's where the news is going to pick up. But if you look historically on the Bitcoin chart and on the Ethereum chart, even though we just had an all-time high and we're now at pre 2021 prices, it is a up down, but it is moving in a massive upward motion. And so you'll see in the next probably 18 months, Bitcoin and Ethereum specifically are going to root themselves in as a legitimate method of commerce, of transaction, and of storing of value. So that was like a long-winded answer. Did I even answer?
Sure, yeah. And you clearly have a positive outlook, or at least I think you look optimistically at the possibilities for Web3. I think I am probably safe in assuming that there are lots of folks who are watching right now who just don't know what to make of the information and maybe cannot make sense of the information right now. I wonder if you also think that potentially we are sort of focused on the wrong thing. We're always focused, it seems like, on the positives and the negatives. We're having debates about, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Do you think it's just inevitable? Because if it's inevitable, that Web3 is the future of the internet, then to me it seems like that as educators, we have to care about it because it's the reality that we're about to face. So do you see it as still in a phase where it's a possibility, or is it the inevitable future, and thus, as educators, we have to care about it because that's the future of the world?
It is absolutely inevitable. Absolutely inevitable. We're not talking about like, are we going to be in a metaverse environment in the next 3 to 6 months? We're not talking about that. Web3 is simply a evolution of most of what the internet exists as today: social media, content creation, storing of data, and just doing it in a way where it's much more empowering. So there is I think the best way that people can go about this is try to find practical use cases as they research. So don't look at the extremes on either side. When I have conversations with people about, the environmental impact of Bitcoin or Ethereum networks on the world, I don't use Cointelegraph and Bitcoin Magazine as sources, because I feel that those sources, even though I believe that the data that they put together and compile is accurate, it's not setting up a balanced discussion. Just like you shouldn't use an extreme on the other side that's only doomsday when we're discussing these conversations. But I think it's the use cases. So for educators, they need to learn about this for two reasons. Number one is there's really cool opportunities for educators in Web3. And a lot of the work that we do is about making sure that they have new professional pathway opportunities where there's some cool side hustles that might not be utilizing your educational pedagogical skills, but Web3 needs those. And so unfortunately, a lot of teachers have to have a second job. But here we are, where you could directly use your skills in this new ecosystem. The other thing is that if the students don't have us as trusted advisors for this, even if you think that this is like not a real thing, if you are learned in it, your students will appreciate and admire it. And if they don't learn it from you, they're going to learn it from the influencer on TikTok, or they're going to learn it from the athlete or celebrity on Instagram. And those people don't care about these students like we do.
Absolutely, yeah. That's the argument that wins me over to it. This idea that it's just reality, and because that is an argument that I make about teaching with technology. You can look at the role of technology right now in the world on broadly from a negative perspective and think that it has had a net negative impact on society. That does not discount the fact that it has a major role in society. Therefore, it's vital that we're teaching students about it. Ignoring it doesn't somehow make it go away. If we are scared about the implications of students being in different social media applications, which we probably should be, then as educators we should be teaching students about that, not trying to act as though it does not exist. If you are a teacher, I do want to hear about because you do believe that actually there are ways that teachers can engage students in actually creating NFTs. Let's talk about that in a second. I'm curious if you are a teacher listening right now, if a teacher is listening right now and they want to just help prepare their students for this reality, does that necessitate creating NFTs, or is there a way to teach students and prepare them and help them understand this inevitable third wave, not second wave, of the internet, so that they are doing an adequate job, or doing the job that they want to do, I should say, to prepare students for their futures?
Yeah, absolutely. I think creating an NFT is a really awesome experience. We just launched an NFT with Ed3 educators, and it takes an incredible amount of time and energy. But I think there's more to it than just creating. I think that and especially for educators that are a little bit hesitant, I think jumping into the creation and the minting, which is a term for putting that visual token onto the blockchain, that's like, I think, overwhelming, but also like there's so many steps that need to happen before that. And I shared in my session earlier this week about 3 different ways that I think NFTs are going to impact the future of education. And the first is art, just giving more of an emphasis on art and art programs and artists, young artists. this is the STEM moment for artists, like maybe 10 years ago, the code.org, everyone can code, all of those really mission-driven type, bringing the computer science experience to as many students as possible. We need to have that with art and design. And so the art is a big piece about really making sure that people understand the power of the art. NFTs aren't just expensive JPEGs. NFTs are a visual marker that allows you to have a sense of belonging to a community in an ecosystem. And the NFT actually is a token that unlocks access to these avenues of experience. But those are only valuable because of the intentionality in art and design, the storytelling elements, really getting students to understand how to be good storytellers in a visual, verbal, and written way. Really focusing on giving students opportunities to write about what they want to write about. I've had so many conversations with students as late as 8th grade, even early high school, that said they've never had an opportunity to write an essay about what they want to write about. Teachers do like open free write, a little journaling, but actually to write about something that they care about. So these types of skills need to be built. If NFTs go away tomorrow, which I don't think they will, but let's say they would, I don't want to have conversations and prepare and workshop with teachers on the technology itself, and I've never done that in my career. It's always about what are these evergreen principles. So you have your art, you have your storytelling mechanisms and building those strong communication skills, and then you have community building. What does community building look like? What are the skills needed to help young people understand how to foster community, how to get buy-in into a mission, and why would people want to be a part of something you care about? Those require really succinct and high quality communication skills to be able to do that. So we're not even talking about NFTs, but then, here we are, and then NFTs just fit right in. So that is where educators need to be starting when we're thinking about NFTs. And if you're like an awesome art teacher and you want to like try something, DM me, because I'd be happy to help you, but it's more than that.
You also believe it's a way for schools to address funding issues, art programs to address funding issues, correct? Where it's conceivable that a school could sell students NFTs to be able to raise more money for the arts, which, as we know, have been gutted financially. Can you explain how that would work?
Yeah, so there's definitely ways that I can see NFTs having a utility for fundraising. It's hard in a public institution. There's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of bureaucracy. Who owns it? Who owns the NFT? Who owns the NFT? The person who buys it owns it. But who is the creator? Is it the student? Is it the school? Does the student get any of that money? What does that look like? Because you can fundraise the program, or you can fundraise the artists themselves. Are we doing scholarship runs for art students to get a full ride based on the art that they create and put into the world? Because I think it's something like there are 11 out of the top. This is actually not a real stat. I can't remember the exact numbers. Let's say it's like 11 out of the top 100 NFT creators are under 18, because there are 11 of them. I just don't know what the snapshot of that, but there are 11, and 6 of them are from developing countries. And they just put their art out there. They leverage social media to build community around it, and they're thriving. So students don't need to wait for this magical moment to engage in commerce. It's just a little bit complicated when you engage, in a school environment. But I think that for a company that would feel inspired to financially support a local school, so what do? They put a little banner on the chain link fence outside of the school. But what if they had an NFT? They had an NFT that they could print out and frame and put in their office, put in their in their location, and then they can have that on their Facebook page. They can have that on their social media. They can have that on their website. They're a part of contributing. So NFTs have this sense of belonging and ownership that gets people to feel like they're part of something bigger. And I think that can, with the proper bureaucratic massaging, happen. But because we had this conversation with the superintendent, and he was excited, but he's like, I have no idea how we could get this through the finance office.
Right. I'm getting the signal to wrap it up. I got to ask you one last question. So you've been out in this world, or you've been involved in this world of EdTech, technology in education, pushing education forward. You know how challenging it is, how challenging it has been to get schools to adopt just basic practices to bring teaching and learning into the 21st century, and now we're deep into the 21st century. We're just now getting to a place where students have more predictable access to a device and the internet, and it seems like education is always still kind of at the trailing end of innovation, just the way that it works. How realistic is it for education right now for there to be any kind of widespread adoption of any kind of practice related to Web3? I mean, are you optimistic about that, or are you concerned that education is going to kind of fall farther and farther behind and sort of miss this moment?
I think we're early with Web3 in general, and I do appreciate the comment on education always being delayed. It really is. They have the opportunity is now. There's no reason why we need to make the same mistake that we did with the social media iterations of the internet, and even just the information superhighway iterations of the internet. In general, what I have seen from this conference is that there are people really excited and curious about this. The shirt that I'm wearing is a welcome note to just come have a conversation, and it's been incredibly positive. I guess the people that were negative just avoided me. They didn't come and try to debate me about it. But I think that there are institutions, there are organizations, there are districts that are excited about this, and we are partnering with a number of those across the country right now, and we do see that in the next 18 months we're going to have a lot of highlights for how Web3 was brought into schools in an intentional way that's focused on teaching and learning, not focused on making everyone rich on NFTs, although that would be cool too. But it's the evergreen elements. But there is a big interest in it. Obviously not enough. There's prioritization-wise, I don't expect everyone to be ranking this in the top 3 like me, but it's the future is bright, and I'm excited.
Well, Michael, if people who are watching this right now want to learn more about you, learn more about your work, where should they go?
So the Tech Rabbi at any social platform, but Twitter's my main space. My DMs are open. And then on Twitter, Ed3 Educators would be a great place if you're Web3 curious to join our Discord, join our community of educators. Almost 1,000 educators right now, every day, having conversations about Web3 in our Discord community, and it's growing every week. So we're excited to have more part of this conversation.
I think it's important to always check our own blind spots and examine our own potential for closed-mindedness. So I've appreciated the conversation. I look forward to continuing it in the future. Thanks so much, Michael Cohen, for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
That was great. I am sitting here with Mr. Mike Washburn, and before we talk about what you're doing, Mr. Mike Washburn, where are you when you feel and your comfortability and knowledge when it comes to Web3, NFTs, the blockchain?
Sure, it's the Wild West, isn't it? And I don't mind that as someone that's lived in the Wild West in games-based learning and Fortnite and all of those things, and podcasting even. The Wild West is a fun place to be. It's exciting to think of the possibilities of what could happen. I do think that we're in a bit of an iterative phase and still kind of navigating how this translates to education and kids. Like as someone that constantly thinks about things like privacy and security with all of the work that I'm doing for my day job, I'm thinking, how does privacy and security play into this space for our students with all of the other things that go with NFTs? And I think I'm really interested in the Web 3.0 conversation outside of NFTs as much as anything, about the idea of creating things and the ownership of the creations that can be, in some ways maybe separated from the conversation about NFTs as we know them now anyways. I think there's going to be this interesting iterative phase that we're about to go through that's going to be pretty neat to watch.
Yeah, I feel I'm at a place where I'm I'm beginning to understand it, but it's I know I'm going to have to hear it explained. Maybe by the 12th time that I'm got it. Like now I've heard it explained enough times where I really get it and see. I think that's the first piece. Like you can't really see the application to education until you really understand it as a whole and what all of it is. But Mike kind of alluded to it just a second ago. My first real deep dive with the work that Mike has done. He's a podcaster extraordinaire. Just multiple podcasts, lots in the space of educational technology and gaming and technology, esports, and he had a Minecraft in education podcast that I was listening to when I was wanting to implement a Minecraft project. And I shared earlier how like those are the times where being innovative in the classroom and creative in the classroom was the most exciting for me, which rubs off on the kids. I'm like, this is cool, this is different, this is something new. But can you share a little bit about what some of your current and future projects are in the world of podcasting and beyond?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to. We just announced at ISTE this week the launch of the Unreal Education podcast. Been working on the idea for quite a while since the winter, and we're going to talk about the future. We're going to talk about the future of work, the future of learning, the future of teaching, and how. In particular, we're going to talk specifically through the lens of the Unreal, Epic Games kind of tools, Unreal Engine, Twinmotion, and Fortnite, and how that creates a pathway to amazing careers and the pipeline to the future of work in industries that are going to be using more and more interactive 3D, things like designing cars. Things like creating stage experiences for concerts, using virtual reality to create live shows or to have conversations with people. Unreal Engine is working on things like that right now. And our students are going to be building those things in the future. And so if we can talk about how that's all going to play out in the classroom, I think we can inspire some teachers to really start thinking about how they're going to frame their work with these tools, with the idea that their students are going to one day be using them actively, and it's going to be a massive part of their lives.
I'm excited to take a listen to it, and I'm sure you're just leaving ISTE, you're just going to have so much to like reflect on and be like, these are the kind of conversations that we want to bring to the podcast. But speaking of reflections and takeaways, our next session is the ISTE Live 2022 takeaways, and in this session we're going to be facilitated by the author of EdTech Essentials and the host of the Easy EdTech podcast, Dr. Monica Burns. And she's sitting with the Senior Director of Membership and Partnership Strategy at ISTE, Heidi Ellis.
Welcome, Heidi. I'm so excited to chat with you about all things ISTE. How has your conference been so far?
Oh, it's been so great. Thank you, and thanks for having me here today. I'm just happy to talk about the great highlights of the conference, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Well, I want to jump right in to talk a little bit about the themes of this year's conference. Can you share with us what are some of the major themes of this year's ISTE conference?
Great, yeah. I think it's really about bringing back that joy. Bring the joy back to learning. Richard Kulata, our CEO, talked about that in the first main stage, and I hope people have felt that throughout. We've had music, we've had dancers, we've had student presenters. It's been really fun. So it's really, I think that is the theme, and hoping that other educators feel that feeling and can bring that back into their work, bring it back into their classrooms. We know it's been a hard couple years. Even under best circumstances, teaching can be challenging. So I think it's really bringing the joy back into learning, and that there's data that backs it up. If you're happy and healthy and feel safe, you can learn better. And so really trying to hone in on that joy and fun and bring it back into learning is really key.
Joyful, right? Or the joyful would definitely be a word I would use to describe the energy here.
Nice.
The past
I love
few
that.
days, right? So just the smiles and the bright eyes and people recognizing their friends that they haven't seen in a while here at the conference from across the hall. So that big theme of taking that away, right, and bringing that back into your work. Are there other things that you've noticed, maybe in conversations or observations? Are there other things that you imagine folks who are here at this year's conference are going to take away from what they've learned and help prepare for this upcoming school year?
Yeah, I think we've challenged our attendees to really think outside the box. And whether that is, just trying a new lesson or trying something new with a tool, I feel like on one hand, remote learning and going through a pandemic forced people to try new things through technology, whether they liked it a lot or not. But they also were kind of things were forced upon them and they weren't able to have the freedom to try things, or decisions were made without their input. And so I hope that we're moving towards a new phase where they do have a little bit more freedom and liberty to make some choices in their lesson planning or tool selection, that type of thing. And I hope the ISTE conference, ISTE Live, has really brought that spark back. Because, educators naturally have that, they want to try something new. They get excited by learning something new along with their students. And so hopefully going into next school year, they can feel a little bit self-assured. Oh, I learned something at this conference. I met this person. We're going to talk about it, work it out, in the next couple months, and then I can try it with my students. And so I hope it kind of gives back some freedom and some confidence into trying something new and being innovative, because it's in there. And that is what I love about ISTE, is bringing that spark out, bringing that energy back. So I hope they can keep it going into the next year.
Yeah, and just having the space here to try something out that's new, to sit next to someone at your table who is equally excited or curious about that thing, when maybe you don't have that person down the hall from you just yet. They're excited about something else, right? So having that person with some similar interests nearby who might push your thinking or stay connected with you too throughout the year. I know I have met so many people here that I continuously check in with, right? Whether it was Twitter chats that we pop into together, or we're on a text thread, right? Or I'm sure there's lots of ISTE Voxer groups going strong, right? Especially over the next couple of weeks, where people are jumping into everything that they want to bring back, to the upcoming school year. So I'm wondering, what were some highlight moments for you that you've heard other people talk about? I know the ISTE Live hashtag has been very, very wild. Buzzing, right, is the right word for it probably. So what are some highlight moments from the conference?
I mean, there are so many. I wish I could be in 50 places at once, because there's just so many great things going on. We were just talking about the expo hall earlier, and I had gone through there and talking about hands-on, trying new things and physically working with devices and trying things out. I love how experiential our expo hall is, and our vendors are wanting to do demonstration with real attendees and educators, and having some real educator demonstrations within the expo hall has been really fun. I know our attendees get a lot out of that. There's been some really nice custom kind of experiences for different audiences. I feel I was part of this leadership exchange on Sunday, and that was really bringing together a lot of district leaders and district decision makers and hearing from each other and bringing their team together. So it was 2 or 3 or 4 people from one district all speaking the same language and learning from each other on the same page. What does it mean to be empowering our staff to better prepare our students for digital learning experiences, that type of thing. And so it was just the energy and those connections, fostering those connections. Not only was it little mini reunions, I saw all these people oh, I haven't seen you in so long, or I've never seen you in person, but we've been following each other for years. I love those moments. And then there was one, it was a roundtable discussion, and they were all talking about, different challenges at their school district, and they were me too, no, me too. There was so much of that just naturally happening, and it's really rewarding to see those connections being made, and exchanging business cards, and let's follow each other because I want to keep the conversation going. And so kind of sustaining these great moments and keeping them going in the next 2 months, even though if I was a teacher, I would I need a break, but it's so energizing here. They want to keep the conversation going. Let's see what we can do together. Let's make it better. And they're already excited for next year.
Yeah, and just the connections here. This is my 9th ISTE, and I know this year, more so probably than any in the past, I'm on the hunt looking for people, you know,
Yeah.
like I need to
Where's my
find, where's this
people?
person, right? I haven't found this, like I'm almost, you know, this internal checklist, and then my actual Google Sheets where like, I want to find
Keep
this person
track.
at this booth, like I
Oh,
want to make
nice.
sure I check in. And so just like you said, you know, there's just that energy around all of those connections, and then the new connections and those moments that happen here. Now, you mentioned the panel format. One of the things I love about ISTE and this ISTE Live conference are the multiple formats with which you can experience something new. I know the playgrounds have been a really energetic space too. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the formats or some of the things that you might have noticed, some of this energy, you know, happening around?
Yeah, it's a great point. Yeah, I mean, we have so many different experiences here. The playgrounds, again, more hands-on, learning specific tools, specific strategies in practice. What can I do this, you know, how can I do this with my students type of thing. The poster sessions are another great format that people love because it's just casual. We're having a conversation. We have a lot of student presenters, which is awesome to hear from their perspective of like, oh, I tried this great project and, you know, we learned this and we created, you know, some magical thing with robots or whatever type of thing. So those have been really awesome. I haven't had a chance. I've been bummed. There's a VR immersive experience going on right now. I have not seen it. I've heard it is amazing. There was esports the other day, like video games going crazy, like so many great things. And there are other more traditional things. There's panel discussions, there's breakout groups, there's even lecture style, you know, research roundtables, a little bit of everything. So I think that's another plus of the ISTE experience is just like find out what works for you or try a little bit of everything, you know? And so I think that's another way to kind of make those connections is like, oh, you're into esports too? I've been trying it. And, you know, like, I didn't know. Can we talk about this a little bit more type of thing? And then, you know, kind of having that validation of like, oh yeah, this is a good idea or whatever. I love that piece of it as well.
Yeah, and just, you know, as you're talking too, I was thinking like when I first got here on Sunday, I kind of did the lap to see all these, right? Like, okay, where are these playgrounds going to be?
Find
Where
your
is this going to be? Right, oh, this is a setup here. This, you know, person has something unique going on. And just the layout of an event can sometimes be overwhelming. But what I've loved so much about this conference is that, you know, I've been able to find all the things, right? Everything I've been searching out for, but plenty of surprises, you know, along the way. Whether it's those, oh, hey, it's this person, surprise in the hall, right? Or a name on a board, or I know you, right? And so that's one of the things that I love about ISTE Live are the multiple formats, the different ways to learn, the different ways to experience some of these pieces. So are there other kind of big, you know, big takeaways that might have surprised you, you know, coming into this conference this year? I know you shared some of the pieces about the connections and bringing this joyfulness back to the school year, which I think is so important. Are there any moments that have surprised you over the past few days?
Oh, great question. Well, I think kind of two different things. So I help lead the ISTE membership program as well, and so that is our year-round membership. So we have, you know, thousands of members in our membership, but I challenge my team even more to capture some of this energy and keep it going year-round. Like, and we do that in our ISTE Connect, our online communities. People are chatting in there 24/7, 365. Like, ask a question, get an answer. People are sharing ideas, providing advice. So I hope all the ISTE members out there can kind of keep this energy going, you know, throughout the year type of thing, because it is hard to recreate this virtually, but our community is so generous and thoughtful and kind. It's not like, oh, putting something out there on YouTube or Twitter and the negativity side of things. It's all just like positive and sharing. It is this feeling from the conference in a virtual space, which I love. So that is one piece. And then a surprise is really thinking more holistically. So we've been talking a little bit more about like individual educators or tech coaches, librarians, and all of that, you know, we need all the players on the field, but can they do even more if their administrators are on board, or, you know, getting the school board on board? You know, it's just been challenging. And so I feel like kind of in this moment of lots of like maybe tension outside, you know, in the world in general type of thing, and this divisiveness is like, no, we're all here for the same reasons. We're helping our kids. We want to help them learn in the best way that they can. Like, we can all agree on that. And so I've been seeing some really great conversations and like progress in like system-wide thinking. Like, how can we transform this in a bigger way, whether it's across a whole school district, even like education service agencies are working together. Like, we're all playing a part in this and are doing more with our teacher prep programs. Like, we got to empower our brand new teachers to be successful from day one. It is a hard job. Like, we have to set them up for success in a better way, to have the tools and the skills so that they can create these digital learning experiences for, our students of the future. And another reason, like, there's the state of North Carolina actually has done something phenomenal work at their highest level, and they're actually providing ISTE membership to every educator in the whole state. Like, that is just unreal and so meaningful to really level the playing field. Like, it's an equity piece, because then schools that have smaller budgets don't have to can we pay for this PD or not, making those hard decisions. Just give it to them and they can learn on their own time, at their own pace. And that's the beauty of ISTE. It has something for everyone. If you're ready to dive in and try something new with VR or robotics or something, great. If you want to just sit back and read our emails and hear that what's coming up next and just kind of digest it, that works too. But we're all growing together. And again, if the more people that are speaking, the same language, getting on the same page, we can make a lot more impact, I think.
I love that emphasis on different roles and how all of those pieces come together. It's interesting because, over the past couple days, more probably than in the past, or maybe I've just noticed it more, some of the conversations I've had have come back to the leadership preparation too, right? In addition to my work focuses primarily with teacher education and professional development with that audience of teachers and coaches, but a few different people have brought into the conversation this idea of building capacity at different levels so that we can have conversations and plan for things, right, really thoughtfully and strategically. So I'm so glad you mentioned that, and I'm glad that you mentioned the live component, right, of this event for folks who might not be physically here. Right. I know 2 of my sessions had the big cameras in the center of the room, those live stream runs, right? And so what does it look like for someone who's attending this conference virtually this week?
Yeah, great question. I think that is something that I was really looking forward to at the beginning of this week. Like, what does the hybrid experience really look like? And I see my team members tucked away in the little, corner office, just monitoring, so that it is a good experience for all those folks who aren't physically here. But I think it has paid off, because I think it's like you said, the content is so rich here. It's hard to recreate the energy, but I think they've done a great job of finding those specific sessions that can translate, virtually type of things. I'm glad they were at your session, capturing those moments. Live stream as much as content as we can, so that it is, we want to just share far and wide type of thing. And so I'm really excited. I haven't kind of seen the results of, what our virtual learners, have had their experience, how it's gone, but I've heard really good things. And so that's, again, a silver lining of a pandemic is we figured out how to do virtual events in a pretty good way, if you don't mind me saying. And so the power and access really to our international audience, others who are just not feel comfortable with travel, budget restrictions, whatever, that is off the table. Let everyone in some way, shape, or form. And so I thank you for bringing that up, because I think that virtual experience, that hybrid, is something that we are doing, we're learning still, but we have done in a good way. And so hopefully we can keep that going year after year, and at other, smaller ISTE events maybe throughout the year.
Yeah, it seems just like a seamless way for people to participate. It feels so natural. It didn't feel invasive as a speaker either,
Good.
It was nice to know, right, that there's other people who might be able to interact with this content later on or right there in the moment. So this has been such a special few days. I think I'm speaking for a lot of people who feel that way. So what's next for ISTE? What other conferences are coming up?
Yeah, thanks. I think we have our Creative Constructor Lab coming up. That's in October. That's all virtual again. So that's a great place to get kind of rejuvenated, kind of once the school year kicks off. It's really all about that creativity piece. So inspiring your students to be innovative and thinking differently, physically creating things, whether it's with maker spaces or sketchnoting or whatever. There's a lot of good options there to have foster that sense of creativity. Again, whatever role you're in, it can be really applicable across a lot of different roles. So that's really exciting. And I think we're exploring a few other like smaller kind of like partner events. We're actually doing something all around digital citizenship as well in October around Digital Citizenship Week. So we really want that to grow that in a big way, and that can even go beyond, it's schools, it's teachers, it's parents are thinking about it. I'm as a parent myself, it's like, oh my gosh, how much, what are my kids getting into type of thing, and how can they really use, technology and the internet to just be creative, positive citizens, and so it's really not just about, commenting on something, or is this, real news, fake news, how many YouTube videos can I watch in a row type of thing, but really how to be good digital citizens and productive like members of an online society. I mean, it's everywhere. Everyone's on the internet all the time. And so how can we kind of help teachers and students think about that impact and, what that means in the bigger world. So those are some of our ideas, our events that we're kind of focusing on digital citizenship, creativity, that type of thing, and working more with our higher ed audience as well. So.
Wow, I love the themes, right, too, right, for these pieces and that embracing of the virtual component. So just so many great things. So if someone wants to learn more about what's coming up, or they want to learn more about your work or how to stay connected, where should they go?
Yes, good question. So on our conference website, I don't know if it's up there yet, but we're going to be launching a new webpage for the DigCit Connect. That's the digital citizenship event. Creative Constructor Lab is up there right now. Check it out. You can see the program. You can see some of the speakers. Registration is open for that one right now. And if you just go to ISTE.org and look through some of the membership services, district services, and again, that's thinking about the bigger ecosystem. There's the higher ed sections as well. I think you can kind of start to see how it all comes together. And so whatever your role is, there's a piece for you at ISTE. And so making sure to find those, and we're trying to do a better job of connecting all those powerful dots.
Well, Heidi, thank you for taking the time out on a busy ISTE Live to chat and share all of these wonderful takeaways. Thank you for such a wonderful event, and I hope that everyone listening in goes to learn about all the great things that are happening, that are coming up at ISTE. So thank you so much, Heidi.
Thank you, Monica. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Dr. Burns and Heidi. I am here with the E-twins, but individually known as Alberto and Mario Jarea. And for those who have not gotten the chance to meet y'all or know who y'all are and what you're doing, why don't you share who are the E-twins?
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Alberto.
And I am Mario.
And we are originally from Spain. We moved to Salt Lake City, Utah, 7 years ago to teach 5th grade.
And I teach 6th grade. And so we have been teachers for a long time, and then we just left the classroom like 2-3 weeks ago, and now we're gonna do full-time consulting. We love to teach students. We love to teach educators. We're just like educators lovers.
And you may recognize both of their faces, but only one of their face was actually in the video that we played a little bit earlier. Alberto was helping us out with the ISTE. We played that earlier with Sam's experience with the big Adobe booth with you guys over there. So, given that we're in the mood of reflection and we're in the last day and the last part of the last day, what are some of your big takeaways from your time here at ISTE and the things that you saw and the people that you've been talking to?
To me, my biggest takeaway is how amazing educators are. Just the passion that everyone was super excited, so looking forward to going back to face-to-face events. And after everything we've been through the last 2 years, we educators still have more energy to just take time during our summer off to come here to a professional development, spend here a whole week reconnecting with friends, learning about new things, and we're excited to be here. So I think that's my biggest takeaway, how passionate educators are.
Mine, I think it's pretty much the same takeaway for every conference. It's just people. It's just like reconnecting to those old friends, like meeting new people. I mean, sessions are great, and I really, really love going to sessions. But you know, that personal relationship that you can create with people face to face, you cannot compare that with anything. Online events are great, but what, you know, like the magic of a face-to-face event, the magic of connecting with people, of exchanging ideas, learning from them, it's just amazing.
And what are you optimistic about? What are you excited about? What did you see that you're just like, okay, I am that gets me excited to go work with the teachers that I'm working with to share this information?
There's a lot of great information. Personally, it's esports. Like, we are a big fan of esports. We watch esports in our personal life, you know, a lot, I would say, and we are a big fan of video games. And we've tried to just, you know, like bring those video games into the classroom for a long time, I would say 4 to 5 years. And now we are seeing how the esports are like growing, and how that's first pushback from parents and community now is not that big, you know. So we can actually just create great esports programs where students can, you know, just like develop some skills that are a little bit harder to develop in the classroom, and, you know, to give the opportunity to those students that maybe are a little bit more shy, you know, or have like a harder time kind of maybe just showing off a little bit in the classroom, giving those students the opportunity to just, you know, like be passionate about. So there are like many great programs around the country about esports, and just we've been learning about how they are doing because they are living the way, and I am just super excited to learn more about it and just to bring it back to, you know, to our schools and all of that.
I completely agree with you, Mario. I think video games in the class is the thing that I'm more excited about, and also the growth mindset of people. Mario was talking about the first pushback from community, parents, because it is normal. You know, like normally we have fear of the unknown, from things that we don't know, right? I think that growth mindset of people trying to understand why esports, video games are so crucial for the future of education. It's been amazing this week to see how people are embracing that with that growth mindset, and we are hoping that will take also to the community that spirit of growth mindset.
Yeah, I was talking with Sam a little bit earlier today and just telling him so much, like in the world of esports, it's so much more than just playing video games. Like everything that we're doing here is found in esports, and like you're gonna have your students that are like, I love playing video games, but I don't want to play competitively. I'm really into like running the soundboard or running this camera switcher or commentating.
Yeah, the marketing, or, you know, like I don't know, like the creation of like materials, for example, some promotion. Like you're working on marketing. That's like real jobs, or like
and real skills, like skills that the students will need in the future to succeed, like problem solving, creativity, communication. We need to target an audience, like all those things, skills that we are developing through video games. We cannot find another tool that develops that many skills with just one game or just with one interactivity.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you guys coming on. If people want to stay connected with you and find out what you're up to next, or have you come and speak and consult and work with their teachers, where can they find you and keep up with y'all?
All right, so we do speaking engagement and coaching around the country. So just follow us at eTwins.edu, ETINZ, EDU, WINZ. It's been a long week. EDU, and if we come close to your hometown and we are speaking there, we would love to connect with you. Also, if you are interested in us to go and speak or coach in your district school, just reach us out, because we would love to do that.
Yeah, and also in our website, same etwins.com, you can find us there, and we will love to connect with you.
Yeah, and it's a 2-for-1 package. Like they come together, so it's like twice as good. So, well, thank you guys so much. And in the spirit of reflection, we have Jake Miller joining us again today. If you're unfamiliar with Jake Miller, he's the host of the popular educational duct tape podcast and his newer podcast, the EdTech News Brief, where he gives you all the app updates that you need to know about and why it's important and how it's going to help you in your classroom. And he keeps it brief. And so he has been super busy because there's quite a lot to keep up with this week here at ISTE, and so we are going to jump over maybe to Jake, who's putting on his headphones. This is the
head.
Yeah. All right. Take it away, Jake. What do we need to know? And what is going on? What did you find on the ISTE floor today?
First of all, I'm going to reach over here and give these guys fist bump because these guys are awesome. E-twins right there doing some awesome stuff. I was glad to get to listen in while I was getting set up. So good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us again. This is bittersweet. This is the last of our 3 days of doing this. I was just tweeting out. I actually haven't finished my tweet. Hold on, let me set it. There's my tweet. I just tweeted out that I'm live right now. Sent. I was going to put in the URL, but I didn't have time for it. This is bittersweet. This has been fun these 3 days doing this live version of the EdTech News Brief. And I wrote it's the last time, but I hope it's just the last time for 2022 because I think this has been beneficial. And if you are at home watching and have been enjoying anything that you've seen in the live stream, please give us a shout out in the comments, whether it's my segments or segments with Holly or Matt Miller or the E-Twins or Tom or Sam or Ken Shelton or whoever else you've heard. Make sure you're giving shout outs to that either in the YouTube or on social media so they know. Keep doing this stuff because I think it's a really good fit for what the educators need. So let's jump into the EdTech News Brief for today. Got a bunch of stuff I've been learning about over the last few days. I was just scrambling around the expo hall talking to people at different booths like, tell me more about this tool because I've got to get this ready to go into the news brief. And they're like, when do you need the information by? And I'm like, 15 minutes from now. So I'm getting all the information for you guys, and there's more than 20 minutes worth, but that's what I like to do is keep it brief. So we're going to stick to 20 minutes so that it's nice and brief for you guys. So first up, Pear Deck the other day unveiled a new thing called Project Pear. This is, I've got to be a little bit, there's going to be some gray area here, some blurriness as we talk about Project Pear because it's not out yet. It's coming out this fall in August, I think is what they're saying. So probably before the school year comes out. They gave some sneak peeks to it at their event the other night, the After Pear Tea. And people were able to play the game, but there's still not a lot of information out there on the web about it. So it's still in beta testing right now. So if you're interested in it after I talk about it, you're going to want to go to projectpear.com to learn more about it and give you a chance to try it out. Maybe you'll be a part of that beta and get to try it out. So here's some of the stuff that we do know. So it is a gamification, which is something Pear Deck doesn't have. They're not really a game-based tool. So they're stepping into the gamification market, alongside your quizzes and your Kahoot and your GimKit and your BlueKit and your Quizlet Live and things like that. It's a team-based game, so kind of like Quizlet Live and some of the other team-based games out there. You could see here one of the beta versions of the screen of what that team will look like, and I saw people using this at the After Pear Tea the other day. It is they're considering it not just gamification but retrieval practice related, which I'm a big fan of retrieval practice, and I've talked a lot about how tools work with retrieval practice, the idea of returning to that information regularly to keep it fresh in our minds. Educational duct tape listeners will remember that a couple years ago I had on Jared Cooney Horvath, who wrote a book relating to retrieval practice and other things, and really powerful insights that we learned about in there. And so retrieval practice is a great thing, having students go back to that information regularly to help them remember it. So this gamifies that idea of retrieval practice. So I'm really excited to see how that works in here. You can see on the screen the students have their own avatar, which they create. They see their name in there. They're seeing these gamified streaks and what levels they're on and things like that, which we know our students respond well to. They see assignments from their teachers in there to go in and practice. So there are assignments coming in from the teachers too, which is also something Pear Deck doesn't really do. I mean, you could assign things that are built in Pear Deck to them, but it doesn't really have the platform for assigning it. So that's pretty cool that they've added that in there. You as the teacher can go in there and track your students' history. You could see one of the beta screens here of what it's going to look like, tracking the students' accuracy, how much they're practicing, and below there you could see their scores on different assignments that you've assigned to them. So it's nice that it also brings in, Pear Deck's always been good for formative assessment, but it's never really been a place where you could see that formative assessment data, right, and actually track it in Pear Deck. So this tool will bring in kind of a tracking element to that, which is nice, a powerful thing there. Okay. Speaking of gamification and formative assessment, the next couple updates I want to talk about are from Quizzes. So I was in the booth a little bit ago talking to my friend Kyle Nemus from Quizzes, getting the details on some of these things so I can make sure I was giving you accurate information. So Quizzes has added in 2 different question types, matching and reorder. Now these are the premium types. I forget the name of what Quizzes paid version is, Super maybe, but they're not in the free basic plan. So if you're on a paid version of Quizzes, there are now matching and reorder questions. So let's look at matching first. So here you see the teacher version of a matching one. You align vertically the prompt with the answer. So A with apple, and B with ball, and C with cat, and D with dog. And then when this goes live for your students, they'll see them jumbled, and they have to drag them together. So here's an example game that I was playing in there with Kyle earlier, obviously a different question, but we can see we've got pictures on the top, which is nice seeing that we can get pictures in there too, different foods that are famous in New Orleans, and the names down below there. And so I had to take and drag the pictures down to the words, and I actually got this right. I was a little bit worried. There was a couple in there that I wasn't sure I'd be able to get, but I got this perfect. So I had to drag them down onto the correct word and then click submit. So that's the matching option in Quizzes. Again, just for the super premium, whatever the Quizzes calls them, just for the paid members of Quizzes. Next are the reorder questions. Pretty similar setup. You could see you put the things in order, and you kind of are matching them to the numbers. So numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 there are telling you what order they should be in, and then above them are the questions that go into those spots. So here's an example one that I played again in the expo hall with Kyle. You could see the 5 different numbers there, and he put them actually completely in opposite order. So I just had to drag them to the correct order from smallest to largest. So I had to drag it so that -5 was on the far left and 7 was on the far right. And thankfully, since I taught math for 9 years, I got this one correct. So good thing my middle school math skills are still going strong, even though I'm not in the math classroom anymore. The other thing that Quizzes has added, and this is in, to my understanding, all of the versions of Quizzes, including the basic versions. I see it in my basic version, so I assume it's there for everybody, is a live whiteboard. So the live whiteboard is different from a drawing question, which is something Quizzes has. It's just a whiteboard that you could pop up spontaneously whenever you want it. You pop it up mid-lesson. You don't plan it in any way in Quizzes. Of course, you could know that you're going to do it at a certain time, but you don't prepare the whiteboard in advance. You just pop it up right then. So you have to be in one of two places, either an instructor-paced lesson or an actual lesson, instructor-paced quiz, I should say, or a lesson to run the live dashboard. So I typically use Quizzes myself in classic mode, which lets my students move at their own rate. So I couldn't use live whiteboard in there. If I go instructor-paced, which I do sometimes so that we could talk about the, if we see less than 90% of people get it right, then we're going to talk about the answers, right? So sometimes I do instructor-paced so I can go over that. So when you're doing instructor-paced, at any point you can click this green button down here at the bottom to open up that live whiteboard. Now that live whiteboard works for you, and it works for your students, and it's your choice who's drawing, right? So up here at the top, you could see I could choose, do I want to allow the participants to draw or not? I mean, this is just me drawing, right? Do I want to put in a background? Now, I don't like that you can't prepare that background in advance in Quizzes, but you could certainly have it saved to your computer and upload it right then. So if you have a coordinate plane or a map or a diagram that you want to pop in there, just have it saved to your computer, click change background, and pop it right in there. Again, I wish it was pre-prepared in there, but you could add it on the fly. Now, I should say there's also a drawing question type in Quizzes. So if you want to have them prepared, just use the draw question, and I'll show you that in a second. But you can see here, I could do drawings that my students will see, or they could do drawings if I give them that option. And then I'll see it over here on the right, kind of similar to Nearpod or Pear Deck or the different whiteboard tools that are out there. So it's nice that it's built into this platform where we're doing other stuff already, right? So this is live whiteboard and Quizzes. And as I mentioned, I have to do it either in an instructor-paced quiz, or I could do it in an instructor-paced lesson. So here are lessons here. They have slides, kind of like a PowerPoint or a Google Slides or something like that, built into Quizzes. And during that live lesson, I see that same green button down there at the bottom to open up that drawing plane or drawing screen. And then my students can draw, or I could draw, or both, however we want to do it. So those are some updates to Quizzes. We've got 2 new question types, reorder and matching, and we've got live whiteboard that we could pop up whenever we want if we're in an instructor-paced quiz or an instructor-paced lesson. And then I mentioned there's also, if you want to plan the drawings out, there's also a drawing type question. And I'm 99.9% sure that this is in the paid version. I didn't double check that beforehand, but I'm pretty sure this is a paid version feature. But I can have planned drawing type questions in advance too. So those are the updates to Quizzes. Who else has some updates? I've seen a bunch of stuff from Team Wakelet here during ISTE. You can now easily add Canva designs into Wakelet. So when I go into my Wakelet, I can click on the image button. And normally I see upload an image. And I think after a while I started to see choose from Giphy, not Jiffy. You can call it Jiffy if you want. Or choose from Unsplash, which is a a site where you have rights to all these different pictures. You know, you're sure that the rights are correct for you to be able to share them. And now they've added in design with Canva. So a lot of people make designs in Canva and then download them and upload them into their Wakelet. And that's always worked, but now they've taken that middle step out there. So now I could just pull it straight from Canva and pull it in that way. Sorry, I actually clicked forward there. Oh,
Hold on one second, Jake. Can you reshare your...
We were doing so good.
We were doing so good.
We were doing so good, guys. Oh, it says I'm in the green room now.
Yeah. Let's see. Can you just reshare your...
Stop share.
Yeah,
share.
and then reshare the tab, I guess.
No. Chrome tab. Guys, we were so smooth.
I know. No one even... All right, here we go.
We're
It's
good.
still showing as... it's showing something in there. Okay.
I think it's...
Oh, wait. There it is. What happened? What did you do?
I didn't do anything.
Okay.
I just wished.
Okay. Well, your wish worked. We're back.
All of my fingers were crossed. Okay, all right, so we were talking Wakelet here, so we've got the option now to go straight from Canva. And Canva also has, I don't have a screenshot of it here, but Canva also has some templates in there too that are set to Wakelet sizes. So if you want a banner for your Wakelet or something like that, that's set there in Canva. Wakelet, by the way, we talked yesterday during the live stream about how when I talk about EdTech tools, I'm excited about things that make the EdTech tools work better, but what I'm really excited about is impacting student learning or teacher efficiency or any of those pedagogical things we're worried about. And I think Wakelet is a great digital portfolio platform or student sharing platform. And so making it more efficient for the students to do that is great news. So it's not just improving a tech tool, it's improving a tech tool that can help students. So another Wakelet addition is they also work well with Adobe Express creations too. So if you're a Canva person, it's in there. If you're an Adobe Express person, it's in there as well. It's in a different place. So Canva was within the picture edition and Adobe Express is over here in the other stuff area here. So we see tweets and flip videos and YouTube and Google Drive and OneDrive and Adobe Express. Now, you notice I did a good job there not calling it Flipgrid, right? I said flip there, I'm practicing. So that was an option there. I believe that's going away now. First of all, they needed to fix the name of it, but also I believe it's going away as an addition here because they've now changed, that's my next thing here, to embed flip videos in Wakelet. I don't believe that button's gonna stay there anymore. Now you just copy the link to your video, bring that link over into Wakelet, and then paste that link right into there. And as you can see below here in this screenshot, it automatically embeds right in there. So we could see, copy the video and paste it in there. I think that kind of adds a step actually because the button's not right there, but it does make it, it works and it works well and it looks pretty. And again, as I was saying, Wakelet, really good for digital portfolios. Now we could bring in those Flipgrid videos, we could bring in our Canva creations, we could bring in our Adobe Express creations, we could bring in whatever we need to, and the students could put it all there. So it's great for the teacher maybe sending home a newsletter to the parents, but it's also really good, I think, as well for students to showcase those different things that they're doing here in Wakelet. Okay, that was so fast, guys. I thought that was going to be 20 minutes worth of stuff, and it was not 20 minutes worth of stuff. So I feel like I have to share some other things.
Go for it, Jake. Keep sharing.
I'm going to get a drink of water first.
All right. Well, while you get a drink of water,
I'm talking really fast.
I'll share one of the comments. Says, I'd like to thank the new EdTech Classroom and everyone involved in making this stream possible. I appreciate it very much. Wish all the best from Lima, Peru. So
nice.
Yeah,
all the way from
all
Lima.
the way
That's
from
amazing.
Lima, Peru. Evelyn, thanks so much for joining us. It's been awesome.
So I'm currently opening up my Padlet where I curate all the information that goes into the EdTech News Brief. I could stop looking for new EdTech information right now and have enough for the next 4 months in here because there's just been so many things that have come out recently. So I'm gonna rapid share from right in there. Why not, right?
Do you want to share that on screen, or you just want to talk out loud?
I'll pop some stuff on screen here.
Okay, share the tab, the different. You might have to redo it because it's a different tab.
I'll actually just pop it right in there. So let's see if it pops up there.
I see a Twitter link. Okay, I'm seeing Twitter.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go.
So this first one here, I learned from Tony Vincent, one of my favorite people to learn from on Twitter. Tony shared that Sticker Mule, who's my favorite company for getting stickers, now also has what's called Sticker Mule Studio. Now, I think the main idea here is that we can come in here to develop those stickers that we're making, but it also makes PNG graphics for us. So if you need, especially PNG, that means transparent background, maybe a graphic that you're going to use in Google Slides or another platform, you could come into Sticker Mule's Sticker Mule Studio to try that out. So let's see, I'm going to click there. I'm going to come back to that tab now. And here we see Sticker Mule Studio. So we could see I could search for different templates, or I can create my design. We could see these templates could be for stickers, or for packaging, or for t-shirts, or for branding, or for events, or for social. Or if you want something specific that's based on something you need, we could just go into create design, and it brings up the space for us to just create a design from there. Now, some of us are already using Canva and Adobe Express and things like that, so we're like, why do we need this? Well, if you don't need it, you don't need it. It's fine. I like educators to have lots of different options for what to use, and students to have lots of different options for what to use. And this is just another option that we can add into our repertoire for when we're looking to use things like that, for when we're looking to create. And that's what we want students doing, right, is creating for sure. Next thing I want to talk about here is Google Drive. Google Drive, I haven't talked anything about Google here. I'm so surprised that I haven't done any Google stuff during the EdTech News Brief live sessions here. Google Drive added in, finally, I can't believe it took them so long, the ability to add in, to use keyboard shortcuts inside of Google Drive. So you want to move a file from one place to another place. You used to have to right-click and copy and go right-click and paste, or open up the sidebar and drag it over, which always seemed really clunky. Now I can Control-C or Control-X and then Control-V in the place I want to get it to. So really efficient and easy way for us to get files from one place in Google Drive to another. I think they have a screenshot, or a GIF of it down here.
I saw, like, when I logged into Google Drive, they said you could do that. I was like, wait, I could not have done that before? Why are you just now telling me that I could just Command-C something?
Right. I was mind blown that it wasn't something that Google Drive has had. I mean, they've been around for, 15 years. How many years has been around? And the fact that they didn't have those keyboard shortcuts for moving files around is kind of crazy. But now I can move them around using Control-C and Control-V. And as you can see in that GIF there, so we'll watch here, in this GIF, they move the file, but then they also show that they could use it to copy that link to another place. So watch right here, they'll click on one, Control-C to get that link, Control-V to create that shortcut. There we see Shift creates the shortcut, or paste it into a doc, and that puts that link into the doc too. So if you want to link a file into the doc, what you used to have to do way back in the day was open up the share link for that particular document that you were trying to share, or maybe open it up, get that link, jump to your other doc, paste that link, and then they added in chips, and so I'd have to go to the chip and search for it. But now I could do it from right in Drive, copy, just click Control-C on the file, and then go paste it elsewhere. As you can see here in the rollout pace, you should already have this. It says full rollout starting on May 26th, 1 to 3 days, so you should have this already, and it's to all Google Workspace customers. And I'm interested in using this Control-Shift-V in there. I haven't tried that out, but it looks like Control-Shift-V creates shortcuts to files. So shortcuts to files are when you want a file in multiple places. So maybe it's a lesson that you use in your math and science classes. It's a joint project. And so you've got it in your math folder, but you also want it to be in your science folder. So Control-C that file from, say, the math folder, jump over to the science folder, and Control-Shift-V it there. And then you've got it in both of those places, so that'll make that shortcut there for you. There's some Google News. I had to get some Google News in there for us. Let's see one more here. Look at this on the fly. This is live right here. This is how you do it.
This is good. This is good.
This is a rapid fire. Everybody's like, Jake, slow down. They're currently using YouTube to change the speed on the YouTube. Slow Jake down to 0.75. Okay. Next, I want to share this that my buddy John Sowash shared out recently on Google, on Twitter. One of my favorite follows for learning about stuff that's changing in the Google ecosystem. And he shared out that now in Google Classroom, images can be shown in announcements. Another thing that it's kind of mind-blowing that Google didn't do sooner, but we could see now he recorded a GIF. John's going to be dancing around here through this video for a while. He added this GIF into an announcement, and it actually shows up right there. Before it was like a file that we had to click on and pop it open. It'll only do this with one image, but it's nice that we can now put images in there, and it's nice that we can do GIFs in there too. So easily add images into Google Classroom to be able to show them there. Works in announcements, and I'm not sure if that works in assignments, but I know for certain it works in announcements. Okay, that was a quick one, so let's do one more. Let's talk. I'm literally just cranking through this this giant Padlet that I have here. I'm scared to open up one of the Microsoft links that I have in here because there are so many things coming out from Microsoft, and I'm having such a hard time keeping up with them. So yeah, lots of Microsoft stuff to share. Let's stick with the Google one, and in the next episode of the EdTech News Brief, we will talk about some Google stuff. I should have hung out with Elad and Mike Tholfsen a little bit longer to talk about some of this stuff. Are you currently working on sending a picture of this to John Sowash right now? No? Okay. Tom's got his camera up. I was wondering what he was doing. Next one from Google, just recently, they announced that we can now do embed content as a full page in Google Sites. So in Google Sites, you've been able to embed content for a while. And so the students could create, again, I'm thinking, how does this help us in education, right? So on your class web page, you could make, say, a Flipgrid video or a Flip video, better yet, and then embed it into your Google Sites. That's been around for a while. Or your students can make a digital portfolio in Google Sites and embed that Flip video or that Canva creation or that whatever it might be into their Google site for people to see. Again, that's been around for a while. But what they've changed now is now you can make it full page. So you see here in this example on the Google website, they are adding in a map, and now that map runs the full width of that page instead of just being in a little box. So a little minor change here, but it does improve the way we can showcase these different student creations and things like that. Okay, well, that's it. I've rapid fired enough stuff there for today. That's a lot. That's the most I've ever fit into the EdTech News Brief. And so what I'd love for you guys to do, those of you watching, is head over to YouTube or you're already in YouTube, open a new tab in YouTube. Don't leave this video. Or open up your podcast player and look for the EdTech News Brief, because this is what we do every week. I bring out an episode and I just share these little things that are changing, because if you've been watching or listening and you thought, I didn't know that happened, or I didn't know about that, or how did I miss that? My goal is to find those things for you and then package it all in one place, because it takes me a lot of time to go find it all. And so I want to kind of just package it nice and neat for you to find those things so that you know what's changing, especially if you're one of those tech leaders in your school that are in charge of sharing stuff with your teachers. I'll find that stuff for you. And maybe you use Canva and not Adobe, or Adobe and not Canva, but you'll see one of the things that matters to you and be able to kind of take that out and get it out to your teachers. So I'm trying to bottle that down and make that simple for you so you could find all that stuff. So I appreciate you guys tuning in. I hope that you'll tune in the future. And I really appreciate Tom and Sam and Mac for letting me be a part of the party here at ISTE.
Yeah, we've been super appreciative, because we were talking about beforehand. It's like, oh, we should do this thing about like what we're seeing at ISTE and stuff. It's like, we're not going to have any time at all to go anywhere while we're doing this. And then we're like, oh man, Jake would be perfect for this. This is what Jake does. And we want to again promote just his book, Educational Duct Tape, because the podcast will give you all of your updates, and here's this new thing, and here's how you can do it in the classroom. And this book is going to tell you what's the mindset about integrating educational technology? Like, how do you approach it without feeling this overwhelming feeling of like, there are so many apps and I don't know where to start, and I've tried some, but it didn't go well, and I don't know what to do, and I want to learn. I want to start using more technology in the classroom. We really recommend Educational Duct Tape. I got my signed copy yesterday, so I'm happy about that. And Sam, I've not read through it yet, but Sam has read it and loves it, and we were actually just talking about it last night too.
Absolutely, yeah, and I just can't thank Jake enough for the work that he's doing. I mean, basically, you're doing a lot of work that we would need to be doing, and I didn't even think about what you just said about an education technology specialist. Imagine how difficult it must be for those folks to keep on top of everything. Like you think you're on top of it, and then something changes completely. Well, Jake's got your back. He's got you covered. So you got to follow his stuff. It is one of the only podcasts that I listen to on a regular basis. Check out the EdTech News Brief. We can't wait to hear what's coming next on that news brief. So we also just want to thank you as our viewers for sticking around, for checking out our live stream. We've had 3 days, 3 hours a day of amazing inspirational conversations with thought leaders in education who are really pushing the envelope in terms of innovation in education. It's been so exciting to talk to so many thoughtful, passionate educators. And it's also been inspiring just to look around the building, Tom, to see over 14,000 educators attending sessions to learn about how to strategically teach with technology, and to come back together because they're optimistic about the future of education, because they want to learn, they want to grow their practice, they want to do right by students, but they also want to feel energized and excited themselves. And that's really a theme that I've been noticing, just teachers engaging in their own creativity. This process of designing lessons through using all these exciting technologies is not just something that benefits students, it's something that benefits teachers as well. It's something you can get really excited about. So even if you weren't able to attend ISTE this year, we highly recommend attending their conference in the future. It is a special experience. I believe, well, I don't want to say where it's going to be next year because I don't have it off the top of my head, but definitely check it out. It is amazing. You will absolutely learn things that you can bring back to your classroom. A large part of my sort of transformation and learning a lot of the tools, learning a lot of the strategies, really getting a fire in my belly to change things and get excited about switching up my practice after teaching the same thing for 7 years had to do with coming to an ISTE conference. So I highly recommend it. It's been amazing. Tom, what's your experience been like?
I would say it makes me, I'm really thankful that we got to do this and share it with the new EdTech Classroom audience, because after the first night, I texted the show to my family, and my sister is an educator. She taught high school Spanish for 10 years, and she never got the opportunity to go to conferences or do anything like that, but she always nerded out on education and pedagogy and things like that, and she watched the replay of day one, and she was just so fired up, and it made me realize like how many educators are out there just like her that just don't get the opportunity as many times to just be exposed to some of these ideas, to some of the messages that were shared today and shared at conferences like this. And I do hope that in the future, if she continues to teach, that she gets the opportunity to attend a conference like this. But I am privileged, and we are privileged for the opportunity to be able to share this, and some of the comments that people were saying about bringing these messages, and it just brings that little morsel of innovation and ideas and of thinking of the future of education and how we can change things and get excited about education and hear messages that are like, yes, like I've been feeling like that. And I didn't know how to express it, but hearing that speaker say those things like really resonates with me and really gets me energized about the work that I'm doing with my students. And so that's been my biggest takeaway, and just the experience and the joy of being able to share all that with the new EdTech Classroom audience here.
I also just want to give a huge thank you to a critical member of our team, Kary. He's a co-founder of New EdTech Classroom. He's not somebody that you're seeing on camera, but none of this would be possible without him. He is behind the scenes hustling, literally doing all the behind the scenes logistics, and we are incredibly thankful to Mac. Incredibly thankful for all of the guests that came on, in particular Matt Miller for being a guest facilitator. We had Monica Burns as a guest facilitator, Victoria Thompson. We also had Alice Keeler as a guest facilitator, and of course Holly Clark, who partnered with us and was amazing as someone who came and sat in the second seat to chat about things, hopping into conversations. So we were incredibly honored to partner with her. And of course, Adobe, thank you so much for partnering with us and helping make this live stream possible. And lastly, none of this would have been possible in any way without ISTE's support. ISTE gave us an amazing spot here. You can actually see everybody walking behind us, where we're out in public, we're in a prominent place. It's amazing, and they totally supported us bringing on their featured speakers, all kinds of presenters here at ISTE so that we could showcase it to you all. So thank you so much, ISTE, for supporting this as well. And we look forward to continuing all these conversations that we had with these amazing educators over the next weeks and months and into the next school year. So I know I definitely have a lot of inspiration, Tom, for future content, ways we're going to support educators as we move into the next school year. And I hope you're also feeling inspired, and we will see you in the next video. Bye, everybody.